Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I would invite everybody to rise and join Council in the singing of O Canada. Be seated. Madam Clerk, we have regrets from Councillor Natalia Lischina and from Councillor Jasvinder Sandhu, who's on maternity leave. Councillor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Council, can we confirm the minutes of the previous council meetings as listed in the agenda? Councillor Knoll and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? And that carries. Now, we have no public presentations, and we have several delegations. And to try to convenience the public the most, Council, I'm going to recommend that we consider item 3, which is what all the delegations are here about, immediately. So we'll do the delegations about item 3. We'll have the staff presentation on item 3, and then we'll consider item 3 right then. And then for the convenience of Oakville Enterprises, who are here for their quarterly report, for item 2, we'll hear that one next, and then we'll go to the rest of the agenda. Is everybody okay with that? All right. Then, Madam Clerk, would you call the delegations?
The first delegation is Charlene Kluman, here just to speak to item 3 on this evening's agenda, Downtown Oakville Business. She's from the Downtown Oakville Business Improvement Area.
Welcome, Executive Director Pluman.
Thank you, Mayor
Council
Burton.
looks forward to your information.
Thank you so much. I see on the screen, I believe they have it up there, so I'll just give them a second to pull it up because I can do that. Sorry, I thought you would do it from the back. Or maybe I can't do that. I'm glad it's not just me. Do a little entertainment. You don't want me to sing, Councillor Elgar. You really don't. Even my daughter doesn't really want me to sing. I mean, I can start just verbally. It's not rocket science for people to follow along with if we want to do that, and then I can get the slides caught up. I know we've got a long night.
Let's give them a chance. Who knows? The mouse pointer isn't moving. Here he comes back. Let's see what news.
My computer's frozen, so we're just booting it up again.
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
Okay. It'll reboot. Okay, so thank you for having me here, Mayor Roberton and Council, and to all the people that have joined us today, thank you for being here. We're here to speak about item 3 on the agenda, so that's the proposed strategy for phase 2 of the construction downtown. And I'm going to focus on 4 areas that I think need to be paid attention to before we move forward and make some decisions about phase 2. 1 is timelines, 2 is access, 3 communication, and 4 the final outcome. So we'll kick off first with timelines. In the report that was released, it indicated a start date of January 15th and that it would run through to November. For years, we've heard about this project running from April to November. We know that this year, although it didn't quite get done, in 8 months, they were able to open the road to traffic. So when we're looking at now hearing that the project is going to go to 10 months long of road closure instead of 8, we're wondering why, and we're perplexed because it's hard enough as it is at 8, and we really can't tolerate 10. I've heard this from all the businesses. I've heard it from the residents. So there's residents associations as well who have stood up to say they don't think it's fair to the community to keep this road closed for 10 months. We must have learned something from phase 1 to be able to make it shorter than phase 1 was, and phase 1 had the road opened in 8 months. So we're quite thrown by this, and we request that it's reconsidered, that there's ways that this project be sped up. In phase 1, the sales dropped on average by 15 to 30% across the board, not just where it was closed, but also the rest of Lakeshore. 47% of those who responded to the survey said it was 15 to 30% drop in sales. 30% said they dropped by 30 to 50%, and 15% said they dropped by more than 50%. This is huge. If somebody said, I'm going to take 50% of your salary away, have fun, good luck, it would be a huge challenge for all of us. I know it would be a struggle for me. Customers indicated to us they were avoiding the area because of the road closure. I've had customers admitting not seeing new businesses through the fences and not wanting to bother to go around to get to businesses around the fences. We saw many days and half days pass without work being complete, yet we got the work done in phase 1 in 8 months to get the road open. I recognize there's some completion stages to go, but the road is open. Why are we looking to extend to 10 months? It's just not acceptable. We can look at strategies to shorten. So we can implement all possible strategies to shorten the time frame. Let's look at longer work hours. I understand a project starts at 7, takes 8 hours, runs us to 3 o'clock. They maybe can't start another 8-hour project again. They all go home. I get that. What else can be done from 3 p.m. onwards? There has to be something. When I look at people who are not working on Saturdays, I think, I work a lot of Saturdays. Why do we not have crews out there on Saturdays? Let's get them out there on Sundays, especially if we need to catch up time. Why are we not having more than 1 crew on at once? I get it. You can only fit 1 plumber under a sink. But if I was working on my house, I'd have the electricians in there at the same time. So let's get multiple crews in to make this happen as fast as possible and disrupt the residents and businesses as little as possible. Why not work in inclement weather? I'm not saying in a storm, but if it's a little bit of a spitting drizzle, they can probably keep going. Perhaps even using radar. There was many times where it would drizzle in the morning and be clear the rest of the day. We use radar to run our events all the time. We have, storms come in and threaten us to shut down our events. We look at the weather, we make the call, and we say, no, we can keep going with this event. The weather's going to pass us at the right time. I think we can implement the same thing here. And let's avoid gaps between crews. Why have a crew come in and have the next one another, month or so later, like what happened with Union Gas and CRC last year? Speed that up, get that closer together, and make use of the gaps that might exist to do things like cleaning up the construction site and keeping downtown clean. If we are starting in January, it should take us therefore to September. Let's still look at 8 months. The businesses have all stated they'd rather have it happen in the winter months when they're quieter. Their fall months are usually strong. Let's free this up, get out of their way, get out of the residents' way, and let's keep going. Access, I think, can also be improved. We had several blocks this year that had fences up while nothing was happening for months at a time. Even if we can't drive on it, let's take the fences down and let the public walk across it. Get from one shop to another easily. See what's on the other side. We were all crossing in the corridors on the gravel anyways. It's not like we can't walk on it safely. Let's take those fences down. The night of tree lighting, they took the fences down. I swear it was in 10 minutes. I blinked and they were gone, which was great, amazing. Let's thank them for that. But clearly they can come up and down quickly. Let's take them down when there's no work being done and put them back up. Similarly, on the weekends, where people had to deke down the side streets to get around fencing with no work happening, let's just do this with the fences and open them up and create that corridor along Lakeshore for people to walk. There's easy, simple things we can do here to make this project run better. We'd like to look at maintaining Trafalgar Road open as much as possible. We know that intersection has to be done at some point, but it is a major thoroughfare, even if it just gets people down to Robinson. Keep it open as much as we can and let people come easily into that downtown. Similarly, Dunn Street has already seen an 8-month closure. We know there's a seam there. We know there's some work that has to be done, but let's shorten it as much as possible and not hit them twice. Let's take a look at parking and make sure that that is done as successfully as possible. People loved the angled parking. Thank you to the initiative behind that from the staff. It worked really well. We don't have the room to do that on the narrow streets in the east end of the downtown. So what else can we do? There's a lot of empty lots in that area. I'm sure the people owning those lots would love to make some rent off of it. Let's rent those lots, turn them into parking lots. Let's get creative with the municipal garage. Maybe we make a floor of it free. Let's open up some parking opportunities and get creative as a group. I'm sure we can do it. And also, let's extend the free parking to the end of 2020. I appreciate that was mentioned in this report as something that's being considered, and I'm grateful for that, and I appreciate that we were heard at the last delegation on that. Let's improve the communication. Rumors are huge. It becomes a big game of telephone tag. So we end up having one person say one thing, they hear it another way, they talk to their neighbor, they hear it another way. The rumors are huge. I know that there's only one person behind trying to get the right message out to everybody, but perhaps there could be a way that that person is updating daily an FAQ page, and we educate the members and the public. Look at that page. They're all getting the same facts at the same time, the right info. They could look there before bothering the staff and could save a lot of staff time and resources because they've got the answer they need. There's a way we can do it better. When we get the communication out to businesses, let's make it more concise. They don't need 8 pages, and the BIA is not a construction expert to weed through that ourselves either. We need it more concise. The businesses have a lot on their plates. They need to look and say, what's the disruption and when, how severe, and move on. So let's do that a little bit better next time to keep that communication more freely flowing. And when we're looking at the outcome, let's consider the end user in this. We need a downtown that people want to come to, not just one that businesses want to work in, but that customers want to come to. That end user needs to be thought about. The trees that were planted in phase 1 have been disappointing to most. I've had calls from residents and businesses about the size. Let's do a little better. We've heard that we won't be able to plant in the tree wells underneath. All of the pictures that show, the beautiful plantings and the beautiful greenery and the renderings of what's to come are apparently a falsehood. Let's make them a reality and bring that green back to downtown that everybody is looking for. Let's look at how we can create it with lighting. If we can't put it in the trees, where else can we put it? Can we uplight the trees? Can we put it in the trees and take it back down? Let's look at how we can be flexible to make patios work for people who are now working around large tree wells and other things that are going to be bolted into the ground. Let's consider the end user and their enjoyment of the space when they come downtown and how we can make it better. But first and foremost, let's look at how we can get through phase 2 better than we did phase 1. We had to have learned things in this process. There has to be a way to make it shorter, not longer, and smoother, not more difficult. Thank you very much for hearing me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Pluman, for your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Paul Barrington, owner of Barrington's, regarding the same item.
Mr. Barrington, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Welcome, Mayor Burton and councillors. Thanks for having me join you tonight. As mentioned, my name is Paul Barrington. I'm the owner of Barrington's, and I was in the phase 1 of the downtown Oakville reconstruction. I'm here tonight to speak to the report that was prepared by the Engineering and Construction Department. Not only am I here speaking for myself, but I have also been asked by many of my fellow downtown merchants to speak on their behalf. I also believe that you received a petition earlier today with 81 signatures from merchants indicating how serious a situation we are facing. Although I could speak to many issues in the report, I wish to focus on the 2 that are the most critical, that being the completion of phase 1 and the timetable of phase 2. We are here to ask for your help. Simply as that. With regard to phase 1, it needs to be completed in a timely manner. We cannot have this dragging on for weeks and months with skeleton crews. This has to have a solid workforce of 20, 30 people in getting this job done in a timely manner. We've already suffered once. We want this to be completed. It's looking great. We saw what could be done with Herculean effort to get the road open. Thank you, Mayor Burton, for getting the Santa Claus parade done. But it can be done. We have seen it being done. What did it take? It took money, manpower, and political will. And that's what we're here to ask you for, is your help. And not just for Ward 3. I live in Ward 3 and I pay taxes in Ward 3, but many of my fellow merchants live all over this great city, town. And our customers, we have thousands of customers that are in all of your wards. And all we heard from them all summer long is, what is taking so long? What is the delay? It's so inconvenient. We're not going to come down here again. These are your constituents. So I just want to say, you know, again, like Charlene said, with regard to the Trafalgar Road intersection, that is the lifeblood of downtown Oakville. We really need to work on getting this up and running as quickly as possible. So really what we are asking here for, as I said earlier, is your support. I don't know what it's going to take to get this time frame shortened, but it has to be finished by September the 1st. Many of our customers go up to the cottage all summer long, and then they come back and they want to see this done. And it is killing us in downtown Oakville here. We are bleeding like crazy with regard to lost revenue. And I don't know if any of you have had a small business before, but the buck stops with us. But what we're asking from you councillors is to go back to the drawing board. I don't know if you have to, how you're going to do it, whether you have to have a new contract, more funds, but we are asking you to get this done in a shorter time frame for all of Oakville, not just us in Ward 3. This benefits all of us. Do you know that I looked at Stats Canada today, in the Government of Canada's website, 67.9% of all employees jobs are created by small business. We are your small business here in Oakville. Downtown Oakville is the jewel. I would argue it's the jewel in the crown of Oakville. When people come to downtown Oakville, to Oakville to spend an afternoon, you know, with all due respect, they're not coming to stroll at the intersection of Trafalgar and Dundas. They're coming downtown Oakville. And the shorter the time frame and the bitter pill we have to swallow, the shorter we can make it and get our lives back, it's good for all of us. And I sincerely mean that. I'm born here in Oakville, lived here all my life, and I love this town. And we really need your help. I keep saying that, but it's up to you, all of you, to help us. We'll take it from there. We'll do a good job. We already do a good job in downtown Oakville. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrington. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is John Akin, owner of Oakville Jewelry.
Mr. Akin?
I'm okay with that. I already thought.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, the next.
The next is Julian Nanapragasam from Sunnyside Grill.
Anna Prakrasan, welcome.
Yep,
Council looks forward to your information.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd just like to, again, introduce myself as Julian. I own the Sunnyside Grill downtown Lakeshore. So I came today again to push for the finish date to be pushed up till September 1st, as initially promised. Sunnyside Grill has been a staple in Oakville for almost 16 years. And what I've seen being on the other side from phase one is I've taken about a 10 to 16% in loss in sales. And we are estimating that the next 8 months, we will take about a 20 to 25% loss in sales. And also our questions to, again, also here to just question again with the concerns about the timelines given have not been is accurate as promised. From October, I kind of left the meeting thinking that the meeting was that the timeline of the construction would be from April to November. However, now we're being notified that it's going to start from January, and also like to open the communication better on that. Also, if we can visit the ideas of maybe creating a shuttle service from maybe a free shuttle service downtown to maybe get locals from northern Oakville downtown. Also, maybe the empty parking spot that JRB just owned on Church Street, maybe we can open up that spot for the colder months. And yeah, any questions?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
The next delegation is Daphne Nisani, proprietor of Boa Boutique.
Welcome, Ms. Nasani.
Thank you.
Council looks forward to your information.
My name is Daphne Nastani. I'm from Boa Boutique. We've been in downtown Oakville for 10 years. I brought one of my very regular customers, Elizabeth, who's a resident. And I wanted to echo what some of our other merchants have said. And in the time that the construction happened, we saw a significant drop, over 30%. We rely quite heavily on discovery traffic. 8 months is totally unacceptable. We truly believe that the work could be done within 4 to 6 months, and we strongly support September 1st being the end date. Strongly agree with everything that Charlene said. We believe that the work could be done at longer hours and more manpower could be present during the day hours. Being a brick and mortar store is hard enough in an electronic world, so we're hoping that you don't make this hard for us in 2020. I'm asking as a request, I know that there is the Heritage Grant Program, and given that people are basically losing their business, I'm hoping that the town would consider putting a freeze on the Heritage Grant Program and using that money for the next 2 years to help promote the downtown businesses, and start a promotional advertising campaign to support the businesses as well, and preparing to do a ribbon cutting and promote the opening many, many weeks prior to the finish date, so that we're not left in a position where people are confused and not understanding that the roads are officially open, because there was about a month where people just didn't know. So we're hoping that you will be able to make that happen. And just a reminder that I think downtown Oakville, or the town of Oakville, has an opportunity here to set a precedent for all the communities that suffer from construction, because that will be an ongoing issue in many communities across Ontario. So I hope that you will make all the right choices. I'll let Elizabeth speak.
Hi, I'm happy to speak tonight. I am a citizen, a resident of Oakville. I have been for 18 years. I fell in love with Oakville in the wintertime. I'm from out west. I have a number of family members that come annually because Oakville was voted, and I'm not sure if it was the Globe and Mail, but it could have been, as the best place to live in our country. Oakville, our community. Not sure it lived up to that last year, unfortunately, just because it was really hard with the fencing that encroaches on the businesses. It literally is impossible to walk down the street. And I had a friend today who I tried to bring to this meeting tonight in support of this entire situation. And she said to me, and I quote, I grew up in Oakville. I was born in Oakville, and we all live in Bronte Creek, actually, is where she and I live. And she said, but I don't go down there anymore after the construction. Burlington is my new go-to downtown core, because after getting in the habit of not being downtown Oakville, where we went to Seasons Restaurant, Cork's Restaurant, and shopped at all of the stores, we don't go there anymore, and we're not in the habit of doing it. So we just don't go downtown Oakville anymore. That's heartbreaking to me. I hosted an event. I opened my home for these retailers. That's how I know them. I'm wearing boa from last year. The skirt is from 8 years ago, because I have known Daphne and Afra for years. I ran a business in Oakville for 12 years successfully, not on Lakeshore because I can't afford the rent. More power to the people that are actually still there. You've lost a lot of people. Wi-Fi, hi-fi, did my stereo system. I shop local. My clothing is local. everything in my house is local. Murins, I've known them for 18 years. You have to put a face on this. It's not just, oh, we're going to do some construction. It takes 2.5 years. We'll lose all the businesses and we'll bring in big box. And I've seen it happen in a number of other communities because I've been around in Ontario for a long time. Oakville is a well-heeled, 300-year-old community with people that care. I care about Oakville. I'm from Victoria, BC, a small town. We stand up for our town. We have a beautiful small town, but I love Oakville just as much. So I'm here to say that if there's more to be done, if there's more that can be done, if there's more that you can do as a resident, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, I would really appreciate more being done to help these businesses, more signage, better access to their stores, better parking. The fences are just ugly, There are other construction sites, and I understand that they're privately owned. I know that they're not owned by the town, but there has to be a way to make this a little bit more palatable for people to come down to the lake. And I did go down during the construction as often as possible. I included businesses like Tatika, Must, Boa, Gabe and Angel that is gone now, Wi-Fi, Hi-Fi, I advertised them, although they're gone now. I included 20 to 25 businesses in the event that I held. Whether they could show up, I advertised them, I marketed them. I did not take any money for the event. All proceeds went to the businesses from downtown Oakville. I'm doing my bit, and I hope that you will too. So that's my plea as a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk?
The last delegation listed is Ofra Nisani, also from Boa Boutique.
Welcome, Ms. Nassani. Council looks forward to your information.
How are you guys? That was my sister, also my business owner of 20. We've been doing this business for 20 years, and we put our heart and soul into our business. I need to remind you what a business is and that we are the lifeline, the arteries of the entire country. And we're on every single street you see. We do not make up Bay Street. We do not make up all the core skyscrapers in downtown Toronto. We are the small business that contributes to all of your children and to all of your family members. And when you take things away from us, we suffer. That means you suffer as well. So if there's anything that you could do, and namely what I'm talking about is shortening the process of this second phase construction, which I believe you can do because there were a lot of redundancies and a lot of lost time, we would hope that you do this for us. I also want to touch on something my customer Elizabeth just said, which is basically a conditioning process. Right now, we're going through a conditioning process with customers. If they start to go somewhere else and shop because they're not interested in shopping in downtown Oakville anymore, it will take years to get them to come back. It will take other businesses to get them to come back as well. And if in that process we lose them as long-term customers, again, we suffer. It's like the whole process continues again and again and again. So let's keep it short and brief, and please do everything you can to dig deep into the wallets of Oakville so that we could find a way to make this fast and efficient. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Council, that completes the delegations. We'll turn now to the item which shall be led off by the staff presentation. Madam's Acting CAO.
Mayor Burton and Council, Jill Stevens will be providing a presentation in terms of the construction elements, and then Dorothy will follow with the mitigation options that we have. So, Jill?
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. First off, I'd like to thank the downtown businesses for their patience during this construction. We have heard your frustration about how construction has gone so far. As Ms. Closey mentioned, tonight's presentation will be a joint one, and Dorothy St. George will be presenting together with me. The importance of Lakeshore Road and the activity that it supports is recognized through all of the planning work that was completed before our construction project even began. We developed an overall streetscape plan for the downtown in 2015, and a significant consultation program was put in place for the design and for the selection of the materials and the furnishings for Lakeshore. The mitigation strategy, which we'll speak to a bit later in the presentation, was put into action in 2018, and we also completed the two-way conversion of the downtown street network that same year. Staff from multiple departments and multiple disciplines across the corporation have been and continue to be involved, highlighting that this is a revitalization project and a $20 million investment in our downtown commercial district. The outcome of this work will contribute to the overall long-term health of the downtown. Tonight's presentation will provide an update on phases 1 and 2 of the project. The planning for the Lakeshore Road project was initiated because the infrastructure was reaching end of life and needed to be either replaced or rehabilitated. The need to replace this infrastructure provided the opportunity for the town to make a major investment in downtown Oakville through the incorporation of a streetscape plan that will enhance the look and the functionality of our commercial district. The Lakeshore Road project is a complex one. It involves multiple contractors working together to complete work required by the town, by Halton Region, by Union Gas, and Oakville Hydro. Infrastructure above and below the ground is being replaced, rehabilitated, or revitalized. And we are replacing high-quality streetscaping materials and furniture. The project scope, as you're aware, includes the replacement of gas mains, water mains, wastewater infrastructure, road rehabilitation, major electrical work, the creation of wider sidewalks, wayfinding, new street lighting, new street furniture, electric vehicle charging stations, the silver cells, and creation of downtown, of commercial loading zones on our side streets. All of this work has to be staged in a way that recognizes the interdependencies of the various components, and that some tasks have to be fully completed before we can move on to the next elements. Phase 1 of the project was to commence in mid-April and be completed by mid-November. As you're aware, and as we've heard tonight, there were challenges in completing the Phase 1 work, and therefore there still is work to be completed. Some of these challenges that contributed to the extension of the Phase 1 schedule included the need for additional budget approval for Halton's work that's included within our contract. The rainy construction season and the early snow also contributed to the schedule. We had rain on nearly half of the days that construction took place. 5 of those days we weren't able to work at all, and 15 days where the rain impacted the schedule and we had to leave the site early. The infrastructure work at Navy and Lakeshore took longer than anticipated. We had some unforeseen events, including the discovery of an underground oil tank, utilities that had been abandoned, and we discovered as we opened up the site. We had a hydrovault explosion. There were some issues with material delays and the general availability of construction workers and skilled trades. We are competing with all of the other projects in the area for construction workers and the skills that we need to complete this job. However, I will note that we did have workers on site for 10 or more hours on 70% of the working days. In developing the Phase 2 schedule, we've worked collaboratively with the contractor and listened to the concerns that we've heard from the public and the businesses downtown to review the circumstances in Phase 1 and how they could be managed for Phase 2. In Phase 1, as you're aware, the roads and the sidewalks were open in time for the Santa Claus parade. As part of the project, we excavated over 4,000 cubic meters of material and placed and compacted over 2,500 tons of granular. We placed nearly more than half a kilometer of granite curb, installed new sanitary laterals over 670 meters, which provided new laterals for all of the businesses in Phase 1. We poured over 1,100 square meters of concrete. We installed the silver cells. The granite pavers are in the first block, and we've got the traffic signal operational at Navy and Lakeshore. For the remaining work in Phase 1, a lot of that is weather dependent and can be undertaken as soon as weather permits in 2020. But we will be talking with the businesses in Phase 1 about when this work occurs. There is some work, such as the signal at Lakeshore and George, that we will be proceeding with in January. That work will go ahead as soon as we can. The completion of the Phase 1 work will be running concurrently with Phase 2 work as well. There will be lots going on downtown. Final steps for completing phase 1 include installing the traffic signal at George and Lakeshore, as I mentioned, the second week of January, installing light poles and pedestrian crossovers, and completing the streetscaping, removing the temporary asphalt, installing the granite, and installing the street furniture. Phase 1 began in March of this year with the gas main replacements by Union Gas in advance of our contractor mobilizing on Lakeshore. For phase 2, we're moving that schedule forward, so the work by gas begins in mid-January and our contractor follows them in February. While gas is on Lakeshore, we will be undertaking the sanitary sewer work on George. Once Union Gas mobilizes, we will need to be implementing some of the road closures. The schedule that's been prepared has been based on a 5-day work week and takes into account that some components of the work are weather and temperature dependent. This is not to say that weekend work won't take place, nor that longer hours will not be employed. Our contractor is permitted and encouraged and very aware of the desire of the community to get this job completed more quickly, and we've encouraged him to work both weekends and beyond 7 o'clock in order to complete the project sooner. Rather, this planning, as the schedule is shown, is based to allow for rain days and other unexpected issues that can be more readily accommodated within the schedule. There are some opportunities for additional crews and additional working hours in given weeks to accelerate the timeline that's been provided in the report. However, we cannot require our contractor or Union Gas to have designated number of crews or designated number of people on site at a given time. We provide the start date, the end date, and the scope of the work and the way that we want it completed. And it's up to the contractor to work with his resources and his knowledge of how to complete that work to come up with a schedule. Our responsibility as project managers is to be on top of that, to be reviewing that, monitoring that for issues, and to be reporting back, to be looking at opportunities to mitigate that, and to be working collaboratively to do that. We have been working together very closely with our contractor and the rest of the team to incorporate the feedback we've received from the BIA, from the businesses, from the community, into the schedule to build upon that, what we've learned in phase 1, and to build a realistic schedule that reflects those learnings. As was mentioned in our report, we will be sharing more regular project updates so that all stakeholders are aware of where we are at and have up-to-date project status information. We have been conducting a series of lesson learned exercises internally and with all members of our team, including the contractor, and our consultant. And through the through the construction process, we've heard from various stakeholders about the delays, about the impacts on business, and about various other issues related to construction. We had the open house in November to solicit more feedback that would help us improve the phase 2 process. And this information has helped inform our discussions with the contractor and our plan for improvements that will be implemented in phase 2. With respect to project management, we will be holding more frequent construction update meetings with all of the parties that are involved in the construction, including the contractor, the Oakville Hydro, Halton Region, our consultants, in order to ensure that challenges and issues are identified and addressed in a timely manner. With respect to communications, we will be providing weekly updates on the project status, and any changes to schedule will be communicated to the retailers, residents, the BIA, council, and the public. We'll also be creating an opt-in email list to allow stakeholders to receive direct project updates from the staff. We have also reviewed opportunities to improve pedestrian access and opportunities to provide mid-block crossings, even temporarily, when construction staging and work permits are being reviewed in order to provide that improved pedestrian access in phase 2. Improved signage to clarify detour routes will also be installed, And additional construction ambassadors will be utilized at key points in the schedule to facilitate pedestrian movement around the construction zone and for the delivery of the equipment and supplies. The next part of the presentation deals with the mitigation strategy, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. St. George.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Jill's outlined a number of measures that mitigate the impact of construction, and these are part of an overall mitigation plan that was approved by council last year. And council, as you're aware, invested $1.4 million in this mitigation strategy. Oakville's quite likely the only municipality around to have a comprehensive plan like this. In phase 2, we're going to continue to implement the mitigation strategy in order to minimize the impact of the construction process, improve communications, and continue with assistance to businesses. So let's take a look at some of the things that were done in phase 1. Even before construction started, a project office was set up in the former post office building on Church Street. It's a dedicated site for liaison staff who are readily able to connect with a construction consultant who is also housed in the same building, as well as with businesses and members of the public. We held information sessions here, and it is a base for our digital Main Street service squad. The liaison staff here have a partnership role with the BIA, with the town being responsible for communicating information about the construction and businesses, and to indicate the businesses in the area are still open for business. The BIA's role is to undertake marketing efforts to bring customers to the area. There are a number of people dedicated to this project other than the engineering and construction teams. And here you see a picture of our liaison staff, Mary Valley on the left and Rachel Waller on the right. And the other two women are Michelle Bally and Nadia Smith. Many of our businesses know these two people from the Digital Main Street Squad. And Daryl Julep from the Toronto Digital Main Street program has also been providing assistance. So there is a whole team in Toronto that's actually providing support to our local team to provide free assistance to businesses. So communications was important through this process, and there are many stakeholders associated with the project, members of the public, residents, visitors, businesses, town council. We've got various departments involved, multiple contractors, construction consultant, Halton Region, and Union Gas. And with this many people, we needed a multi-pronged approach for communications. That's included a website dedicated to this project, social media, information booklets that have been distributed to all of the merchants in the area. Information meetings have been held about the construction and its progress. We've provided digital directional signage throughout the downtown, but we also implemented a campaign, a lighthearted campaign to bring some humor to the situation. And you see an example here of the banner that was over Trafalgar Road for much of the project. Our liaison staff also conducted in-person meetings. They responded to inquiries and requests for information by email and phone as well. Updates were provided regularly to the BIA staff, as well as the BIA board and town council. For phase 2, as Jill indicated, there will be an addition. We're going to have an opt-in email where businesses or members of the public can receive direct input on the construction project simply by providing us with their email address. We are also, we've set up a log process whereby every inquiry that comes in regarding this project will be logged for follow-up and closure. So we make sure that the experience that people are getting searching for information about the project is improved in phase 2. One of the problems that we found with communication is that with all the stakeholders in the process, there were multiple emails, multiple phone calls going around to various people at Town Hall, and it creates confusion. It makes it difficult and inefficient to respond to those information. And with this new logging process, we hope to improve that result. There were a number of economic programs that were implemented as part of the mitigation strategy. There was wayfinding and signage throughout the downtown. Patios and outdoor displays received reduced fees. That was approved by council and recommended to be extended throughout the period for phase 2. And as an example, a patio before our pilot program was implemented would have been paying somewhere between $3,500 and $4,000 a season for a patio permit. That's been reduced to $750. The permit fees for A-frame signage has been waived. The hoarding signs have been, the permit fees for that have been waived as well. We do know that businesses, they've expressed their interest in putting signage up on the construction fencing, and that fencing is really under the ownership and responsibility of the contractor, but we are having discussions with them to see what kind of accommodation we can make and what kind of signage might be permissible. Something that doesn't interfere with the directional signage and the safety signage that has been in place for phase 1. With respect to parking availability, there were more parking spaces created, both permanent and temporary, in phase 1 than were impacted by the construction, and that will continue, and there's actually an additional 20 spaces that will be in place over and above that were provided in phase 1. Subsidized parking, I'll get to that in just a minute. We had a restaurant program in place with Skip the Dishes to provide some incentives for businesses to participate, and the Digital Main Street program as well. As part of the mitigation strategy, council approved a parking subsidy that was introduced for the duration of construction, being the spring of 2019 through to November 2020. The BIA requested through the Budget Committee that the existing subsidy be extended from the end of construction period to the end of December 2020, and in order to draw back customers following the completion of the project. And what that means from a financial perspective is that the parking reserves will be lower than anticipated because of the lost revenue for that period. The cost for extending the subsidy from November 20th to the end of December 2020 is estimated to be about $47,000. But it also means that it's a gesture for the business district, that we want to bring customers back, and staff are recommending that this subsidy be extended as requested. Part of the subsidies for parking related to honk transactions. So the first hour was free with a promotional code of downtown. And as you can see from this chart, there was a steady increase over the last year for parking for honk transactions in the downtown core. There was also an increase in the number of unique users. So we were getting more people using this app, which was the intention of providing that subsidy. The Digital Main Street program was launched in Oakville's 3 BIAs during the spring of 2019. This recognizes that retail is changing, particularly with respect to e-commerce. And we know that a new retail model needs to incorporate a digital presence. This program provides free one-on-one assistance to businesses, helping them learn and adopt new digital technologies and practices. Oakville was awarded a $30,000 grant from the province to implement the program, which leveraged $20,000 in municipal funding from the mitigation strategy budget. Businesses are also able to apply for a $2,500 digital transformation grant from the province to assist in implementing new ideas. This has gone back, skipped a few slides, so I'm going to go back. Since its launch, over 70 businesses have received one-on-one training, and that's not a one-time occasion. Our Digital Main Street squad has been back to various businesses numerous times to help them with various aspects of a digital strategy. 38 businesses have applied for the digital transformation grant and 25 have received it. And I should note that the program in Toronto has extended the funding application beyond the end of the year into mid-January. So there are still the opportunity to apply for that grant. A series of workshops were also held, providing Instagram training for multiple businesses. And after those took place, our digital service squad got a whole bunch of new requests for one-on-one assistance. What businesses have learned through this program is going to help them well beyond the construction period. And we've received excellent feedback about the program. Here's some of the feedback that we've received on social media. For businesses impacted by construction, this program is a useful way to draw in new customers, and it is hoped that a larger percentage of the businesses in downtown membership will take advantage of it. I also want to note that there are a number of businesses that implemented mitigation initiatives of their own, and I think they should be recognized. And one of the examples is Cobb's, who brought in a trailer and put it into the parking lot across from the post office site, and found that it was a successful way to keep the traffic going throughout the construction process. The BIA strategy during the construction process was to hold as many events as possible during the construction period. Town staff provided assistance to the BIA regarding logistics and implementation, and the contractor endeavored to provide a safe environment for all the people participating in what is really a construction zone. The BIA was able to maintain its long-standing traditions, such as Midnight Madness and the Christmas tree lighting. For Phase 2 construction, the contractor will continue to minimize disruption and accommodate planned events through a review of the BIA's event schedule. So schedule for Phase 2 is moving ahead. We have detailed plans from the contractor and all the next steps associated with that phase. There's a lot of activity going on behind the scenes to prepare for the work in the new year. The recommendations before you, members of council, are to provide some waivers and programs to extend these programs through the Phase 2 project. And what you'll see early in the new year is the sanitary sewer on Thomas Street, which is scheduled to begin on January 6th. Union Gas will be starting their work in mid-January. And the traffic signal, which everyone's eagerly awaiting for at Lakeshore and George, will be installed in mid-January. We'll be scheduling an information meeting in January to provide regular updates and building the opt-in email database for direct project updates, as well as providing regular updates on the website to help keep all stakeholders informed during this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. St. George. Are there questions? Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, a question of the slide that showed the timelines starting in January and going till November. Jill, what can we do to end it in September? Is that out of the question, or are you working towards that?
Sorry, there we go. Through you, Mayor Burton. As I mentioned during the presentation, we have spent a lot of time looking at the schedule, how things relate to each other, what happened in Phase 1, and what needs to happen in Phase 2. Completion by September 1st is not a reasonable expectation based on what we know about the amount of work that has to be done and how it has to work together to be completed.
Okay, so this is the best we're going to get. The contractor, can he put more people on the job? Like, is it, like I heard you saying that, you're working with the contractor and he has to live up to the contract. So his contract is up to what, middle of first week of November? Is that what it is right now?
Through you, Mayor Burton, Phase 2 is currently scheduled to end at the Santa Claus Parade. That's been our milestone for both phases. The contractor is permitted to work longer hours, to work weekends, but we're dealing with an environment where the contractor has unionized staff and where we've got multiple jobs that are competing for the limited skilled labor and construction workers that are out there. So we are continuing to look at ways to advance the schedule, but to advance it by 2 months to September 1st, I think is more than we can do.
Okay, so most of the presentations tonight, everybody needs it done by September. So what you're saying is that's not going to happen and can't happen.
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, so we've presented a construction schedule that we believe is realistic based on what we've learned in phase 1. And we will continue to work at ways to accelerate it, but not to September the 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Longo?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Stevens, just with respect to communication with the contractors, the questions I have are, as things, unknown things happen, you mentioned an underground oil storage tank, water main issues, things like that. What's your recovery? Because I saw the report was a deep dive into some of the things that went wrong. How are you going to help mitigate and have a kind of a quicker response to things that come up that are unexpected? Critical path items, delivery of things. I know we talked about accelerated schedule, but people are asking for a September 1st. Is there a way of working with the partners, with Hydro and other organizations that may impact some of the construction that the actual construction company has to do? Is there a way of coordinating that up front now so that we can try and mitigate that going forward?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that coordination with the other agencies that are involved and with the contractor has been something that we've been very much very involved in over the past couple of months, looking at ways that we can be working together. So as an example, the more frequent construction meetings, we've said that that's something we're doing in phase 2, but in fact, it's something we've already started. We're bringing in more people to those to represent all the different disciplines that need to be involved. Hydro is at every one of those meetings now rather than being there on an as-needed basis, just in case something does come up that we need their assistance with, and they've been very responsive with trying to help us with the remaining work that was in phase 1 and being ready for phase 2. Same can be said for Union Gas. We're working very closely with them on ways to accelerate their schedule, looking for opportunities to bring in additional crews as an example, because once they're done, then our contractor can start moving, which then it moves up some of the other tasks in their program. So yes, this is something that's an ongoing discussion. Lots of progress has already been made to establish and improve those working relationships, but it's something that we will continue to do through the project. And those regular updates that I spoke about, those weekly updates, are going to help keep us accountable to where we are in the schedule, identifying what issues may have come up that week, and what is our mitigation plan to get us back on track.
So, recognizing it's a very complicated project, there's a lot of old infrastructure, there are a lot of unknowns that, phase 2 could happen. I think it's going to be really important for that communication, because you have eyes on the street, people are watching at all times, to be able to see what happens, something comes up, to be able to try and mitigate that, but then also communicate, here are the things that are happening in a very timely fashion, so it's not seen as inertia, it's seen as there are things happening, we can't actually do anything about it at this point, and here's the steps we're taking to be able to mitigate that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Are phase 1 and phase 2 both the exact same amount of work, or is one a little heavier than the other?
Through you, Mayor Burton, there are some tasks in phase 2 that were not in phase 1, such as the sanitary work on Thomas and the sanitary work on Lakeshore from Allen to Douglas. So there weren't additional sanitary sewer projects that were associated with phase 1. However, phase 1 was where we started, and the Navy Lakeshore intersection, I would say, was probably one of the most complicated parts of the project. So while the extent of it wasn't longer, the amount of work and the complexity of it was a little bit higher than some aspects of phase 2 are expected to be.
Okay, so
they do sort of balance out.
okay, so the whole thing's being equal, then they're both sides of the coin there. Okay. So, and just to go back, so in 2015, we had developed this plan. Have we always had a 2-year schedule on it? Have we moved off of that? Have we changed that?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, the schedule was always based on breaking the project into 2 3-block phases.
Over 2 years?
Over 2 years.
Okay. And some of the, I guess, where some of the frustration that I've heard tonight from some of the delegates and even from some council colleagues has been, when there's no work going on, how do we know that there's just no work going on, or there's things in the background waiting and moving around, I guess? I guess whenever there's no work going on, does that necessarily mean that nothing's being done?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, the short answer to that is no, that doesn't mean that there's no work being done. There are some aspects, such as the water main, for example, where inspection is a very important part of that. We need it inspected before it can be commissioned, before it can move forward, and sometimes that takes time. So there is work that's happening to get that all set up and get the inspection done, make sure that it's passed, as an example. But I will also say that the emails that we were sending out as updates at the beginning of the project, we're saying, here's what you're going to see in the next week. And as we progressed, we changed those to say, here's what happened last week, and here's what you're going to see next week as well. So that I think that helps to mitigate if there's a sense that there's work not happening, that will have been, what actually happened during that week will have been reported in that email. So you'll have seen what was supposed to happen, you'll see what's actually has happened and what's going to happen coming up. So I think that change to our reporting process is going to help mitigate those concerns.
Thanks. And then my last question's with regards to the penalties, and I'm wondering if you can help me understand this. I'm looking on page 68 where we talk about the penalties imposed if substantial completion is not achieved by these dates. But then we go on to say that in order to have these assessed, the town has to allow the contractor to continue to work behind those dates. But then we go and the town will not require that work to be done past. So it seems to me like we put a penalty in place, and then we've gone and put another clause later in which nullifies that penalty in place because we won't allow them to go and do the stuff that would assess the penalty. Can you explain to me how if they're delayed, what the penalties are, and how we can ensure that both not just a carrot but also a stick is motivation to get it done on time?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the contract does include a clause for liquidated damages. If phase 1 was not completed by a certain date and phase 2 by the certain date, and those timelines being the Santa Claus Parade, as I mentioned. If the contractor had been allowed to continue to work past that date, past the Santa Claus Parade, so the parade was rerouted or impacted in some way, but work continued to happen, then we would have been able to assess the liquidated damages for that additional time. And those damages help to recover the cost that staff and our consultants need to invest in making sure that work is happening on those days and the inspection, that sort of thing. But understanding the importance of the Christmas season, for shopping, understanding the importance of the Santa Claus Parade, we told the contractor to demobilize from the site so that those events could go ahead as scheduled and as promised. So because we haven't allowed the contractor to work, we can't then turn around and say that you need to pay liquidated damages when they're not actually able to be on the site.
So I'm understanding, they had till November 15th,
Yep.
but then we have to allow them to work past the date that we gave them to
Yes.
get the penalties, but then we wouldn't allow, when I'm told a deadline, I got a deadline. It doesn't mean I've got 3 days before the deadline's assessed. I don't understand how that factors into whether we have penalties, whether they're allowed to work past the penalty date. I don't understand how that works.
I could just assist. One of the rationale for us to stop the job.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, is the mic not working? Can you hear me now? Okay. One of the rationale for stopping the job was to allow for the Santa Claus Parade to proceed. We had made that commitment throughout the program, so we wanted to ensure that that could happen. Yeah, I understand your dilemma is if we say 15th is the end, and then we have penalties, what's the logic in that, if I'm understanding your correct? Yes. So I think the logic in that, if there had been a week or two more that they could have done and continued some work perhaps with the street open and the Santa Claus Parade being able to take place, we would have perhaps considered their ability to do that. It was more than that time frame to get it done, and that was even doing temporary work. So I think we made the decision that it was inappropriate for them to continue along with the extent of work that they had to do. It was better to shut the job down, allow the Santa Claus Parade, repair the street to what it is, and then come back later in 2020 in order to finish the job. So it was the circumstances of what was left to be done that changed the application of the penalties or the liquidated damages.
Okay, so then we know we're going through the same thing again this year. So by that rationale, do we set the deadline for November 1st and give them 2 weeks so we can penalize them if they're not on time? I mean, how do we avoid this trap again?
Is my mic on?
It's got to go red.
I won't be impatient with it, okay? We are looking at the liquidated damages and the incentives to see how they should be applied in the next phase. Obviously, were not as effective as we thought they could have been in this phase. We are looking at that and revisiting the contract in order to address that issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
Thanks very much, and thanks to all the delegates for coming out and sharing your pain and your frustrations, and thanks to the staff for generating the report that Councillor Giddings and I asked for in October. So I have a series of questions, but the order I'm going to go in is not what I started out with. Director Stevens, you had indicated that what we have within our control is to provide the start and the end date and the scope of work. And that is the control we have. So I guess what I want to understand is, what do we need to change to get the end date sooner? We gave them a project. We said you can start here and you can finish here. We've now given them this window. If we say the window is different, can we do that? Because I'm hearing we're reviewing and revisiting the contract. And what do you need from council in terms of support to achieve an earlier deadline, given that you're requesting an earlier start date?
I think you gonna take it? Sorry. You take it.
No, you're still green. You got a flashing green.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absent of all that, I lost the train of thought I had. And the question was, again, I'm very sorry. I lost my train of thought entirely with the light.
Red lights are a little scarce tonight.
I have recalled. So the contract that we entered into was a 2-year contract, which specified the timeframes for the construction. If we change the end construction timeframes, we are changing the fundamentals of the contract. And so what we're looking at doing is working with the contractor, setting out a realistic schedule that we have set down here in order to ensure that we can finish the job. We can assist the contractor as much as possible in getting that job done by November, the time frame that we've set in this schedule. So if I can make sure I've been clear, changing the end time frames would be fundamentally changing the contract.
So thank you for that. My confusion is we are revisiting the contract. And so once we're engaging in that, given the significance of the impact, and that we're asking to start earlier. And I will go out to say that starting earlier has merit because people feel that the winter season is the slower season. But we're already engaging in that contract. So I would ask that we do a greater due diligence to say, what would it take to move that time frame away from November? You know, we're hearing September. I've heard you say September 1st is not realistic, but we've given them this latitude, and we haven't implemented incentives that seem to make a difference to them. I've asked the question, and I am going to ask it later on, Mayor Burton, through a motion, Councillor Giddings and I have, what can be done, whether it's financial or otherwise, to change that date, to achieve the requests and the objectives, and minimize that pain. So on to my other questions, and these ones hopefully are simpler for you. There's been some frustration about a lack of power being available to the BIA. In phase 2, will we be providing power that's accessible to the BIA so that they can beautify the area?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the new streetlight poles will include receptacles, electrical receptacles. With phase 1, we had a delay with the delivery. We had to use the old poles, so that wasn't a possibility.
We will have these in phase.
But there will be receptacles on the streetlights in phase 2.
In terms of, there's been talk about extending the length of work in the day, but just for clarity, we have always given them the latitude to start at 7 a.m. and finish at 9 p.m. was my understanding. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that's correct. Yes,
Okay.
we're continuing that through phase 2.
So what will change in phase 2 for the contractor to take us up on that? Because they weren't taking us up on it as all, I mean, they certainly, listen, they killed themselves near the end. I mean, I hope people said thank you to some of those workers because they worked really, really hard in those last few weeks. But the contractor didn't take us up on it in the early parts of phase 1. So what have we done in our negotiations or discussions to incentivize, encourage, given that we cannot tell them what to do?
Through you, Mayor Burton, part of that is through the staging, and so we've switched we're going from east to west instead of west to east. We've done an analysis of the work that has to be done in each block and how that is best staged, and so doing that, going from east to west is allowing us to move more quickly from the underground work to the above ground work, which then allows more people to be in place. The underground work, there are challenges with working beyond 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or whatever in the afternoon, because those jobs typically take 8 hours to do the next section. We don't want to be opening up trenches that then fill with rainwater overnight and we spend the next day pumping those out. We also need inspections to be happening if we're dealing with water mains, and those inspectors are available during the day. Same with some of our electrical stuff. We need inspections that has to be scheduled. So the contractor, our whole team is of course very much aware that we want to be accelerating this where we can. They know that they are able to, and they know that we're encouraging them to add more crews whenever possible. And they will where there is available staff to do that. But as I've mentioned, we do have to look at the number of construction workers and crews that are available, and the fact that there are limitations on the number of hours that they can work in a given day. So that message is continually being shared with the contractor, as is the encouragement to take us up on that offer.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. In terms of communication, we've heard about weekly reporting, and I would concur that the change in the last while about what was completed and what's coming up was a big improvement. But I guess I'm concerned about the reliance on booklets to communicate plans versus real time, just in time, to get people feeling they're in the know and not, falling susceptible to the rumor mill. Will there be enough resources put into updating something more frequently and more accurately.
Through you, Mayor Burton, as Ms. St. George mentioned, we are developing that opt-in email distribution list. So that's one more way for people to get information directly from us as opposed to relying on other channels. Updating the website is key, and that is something that can be done frequently and regularly as new information becomes available. And the tracking mechanism that was also mentioned is another way for us to be identifying issues and resolving them. And that could be used as well for frequently asked questions information piece to go out so that people know if somebody's already asked the question, we can get them the answer more quickly by updating the website and providing that to them. So yes, there will be additional resources there will be sufficient resources put towards that. We recognize the importance of that role. We also, though, encourage people to come in through a central location so we can make sure that that right information is getting out to people and that message is being consistently shared. So the same information is being shared with an answer to the same questions.
Okay, thank you for that. We heard some discussion about the hoarding and about the signage on the hoarding. And there were examples of retailers that, in order to minimize the negative view that their customers were experiencing, look to put signage on that hoarding. And I understand it's a safety first issue, but will we, before we begin construction, have a plan that allows the retailers to participate in some form of identification to mitigate the negativity of all those fences?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we are exploring with the contractor and with staff at the town to look at what can be permitted on those signs. And as I said in my presentation, the signage is actually the ownership and responsibility of the contractor, so we need to have a fulsome discussion with them. Safety is first. The safety signs, the directional signage is important to make sure people can access the stores in a timely manner. But we are having those discussions, and there's some differences between third-party advertising and advertising with branding and logos of stores versus things that some stores would like to put up. So that's more of artwork that creates a better experience for their customers. And we think that there are options that will work, and we will be continuing to to have those discussions and bring forward a plan early in the new year.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm almost done, Mayor Burton. Okay. In terms of the garbage and the maintenance of the overall downtown. So listen, anybody who's done a renovation at all knows there's dust everywhere. There's just stuff. But it seemed to not have a regular cleanup, and whether that was the garbage pails, which I believe we have taken some responsibility for, or the contractors, workers, perhaps not being really good at basketball and getting their garbage into the can. What's going to change this time?
Through you, Mayor Burton, it is my understanding that the contractor is responsible for maintaining a clean work site, and that there was regular maintenance of that site. But we will bring that information back to the contractor and make sure that there's more monitoring to ensure that the site is kept clean.
Thank you. My last question, and then I'd like to hand it to my partner, who's probably you're stealing all my questions. The role of the ambassadors. So I will say that I think it was a brilliant decision to create the ambassadors, to try and create people who want to be helpful, to get them across. But for clarity, are they allowed to do more than just guide across, which is first and foremost what we want them to do? Can they announce or share activities that are happening to encourage visitors to go to Town Square, or just to be more of a spokesperson for downtown?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the ambassadors that you'll see throughout the site are employed by the contractor, and their job is to get pedestrians safely around the site. The BIA is responsible for doing marketing of its events and so forth, but Visit Oakville also has ambassadors down during seasonal periods, and part of their role is announcing events and providing information to visitors and residents about what's happening in the commercial district.
Thanks very much. That's it for now, Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Councillor Hazathiel. And I pressed the button and the microphone that wouldn't work. It's working now. It's a miracle. And you're right, your partner is next. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Stephen, Ms. Pluman from the BIA prefaced her comments by saying that we must have learned something during phase one. It sounds like we've learned quite a bit. We heard about delays based on hydro vaults and oil tanks and bell chambers and old infrastructure and various other things. It sounds like phase two is a little more complicated in terms of the sanitary from Allen Street. Is there any way that we can look and see what known infrastructure is there that may have caused us problems last time that we can get to sooner rather than later? Because I know the Navy Street was I believe a 3-week task that became 3 months. And it's that kind of activity that eats up our time and quite frankly scares me.
Through you, Mayor Burton. So we don't have that same sort of bell chamber work to do in phase two. In phase one, we started with the Navy and Lakeshore intersection because it was the most complex and we wanted to get it done and out of the way. But it also impacted our ability to move on to other blocks because those crews were there longer than anticipated. So for phase two, we have looked at the infrastructure that's there, the work that's going to be involved, and we've flipped the schedule around so that we can be progressing more quickly based on what we know about the infrastructure that's there and what we need to do in terms of new infrastructure.
Thank you for that. One of my fears about phase two, we heard about the rain delays caused in phase one. Being in the ground in January, February, March, I'm afraid that we're going to be replacing rain delays with snow and freezing weather delays. What assurances or what can you tell me to make me feel better about that?
So through you, Mayor Burton, the schedule has been put together knowing that we will have cold weather in January and February. As I mentioned in the presentation, we've based it on a 5-day work week schedule, but that there is encouragement and whatever the stronger word than that is to be putting more hours to it and to be making up, if we lose a day to weather through the week, to be making that up on a Saturday or a Sunday so that we can be moving forward. So you'll see, so for example, you'll see on Thomas that the underground work will happen over the winter and we'll restore the road so that it's drivable as soon as the sanitary work is done. But the paving, the work that is temperature dependent, will be delayed until May so that it can be done at the right time and be done appropriately so that, you know, it is completed to an appropriate condition. So we are staging things that way, looking at what can be done in the colder weather, doing that then, and then the work that can't be done in the colder weather is grouped together in the spring.
Thank you. In 2019, in phase one, there were 3 blocks completed and there are 3 blocks again in phase two. Why can't we do it a block at a time or a block and a half in 2 sessions so that we can have better accessibility and pedestrian access to the stores?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the schedule is based on the crews progressing from one block to the next block as they finish their work. So if we were to work only on one block, we would have the water main crew come in, they would do their work, they would wrap up, they would leave, and then only come back when we opened up phase two to construction. But that assumes that they're available still and that some other job hasn't scooped them up and taken them over and that we don't have the ability to call them back. So this way, we're in a more smooth transition from block to block, maintaining those crews longer on our site so that we can get our work done before they're freed up to go on to other jobs.
The report talked about general availability of construction workers and skilled trades. If we have a contract with the contractor, they are responsible for providing those, because the biggest concern, or one of the concerns, was the gap between one trade leaving and the other. I think somebody mentioned the plumbers and the electricians in a renovation. Don't we have the availability, or doesn't the contractor have the ability to line them up better? We've got a contract, I understand that trades are short, but surely they have the trades under contract, do they not?
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Burton, the schedule has been based on a lot of work and analysis by the contractor of how he will move crews around the site, the crews that he has available. They're, as I said, very much aware that we want to move this faster, and if when they have more resources, if they will put them on the project. But there are only so many, they have their staff, their workforce, and they deploy that as they need to finish this job, and with the right work at the right time based on the skills that we need to do those different elements.
We heard in the week prior to the Santa Claus parade, the number of workers that were out moving granite and laying patio stones and curbs and so on. Based on most of the comments this evening and previously, they'd like to see that kind of activity throughout the project to get it done much faster. Is it because they are different trades, different projects being done? Like, why can't they be done concurrently?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, because there are different trades, there are different numbers of people who can work on a given part of the project at one time. You can't have as many people working on the water main as we did working on the granite, as an example. There's a space constraint for one, and the type of work for another. So the intent always was that we would have more people doing the landscaping work because there's more space to spread them around. And that is work that you can put additional people on and see more progress. The water main work, as an example, there's a finite ability to add more resources to that. After that, there's just not any space, and it doesn't contribute to moving the project along faster.
The project talks about the changes in project management oversight. Great to hear. I'm just wondering, though, how that will affect it if we can't necessarily get the trades or the general laborers back. How is that going to help us?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the changes in project management oversight are going to help us be identifying issues and challenges earlier and be able to act earlier, to be asking what are the mitigation plans and show us how those are going to be working to get us back on schedule or to keep us on schedule before we even get off of schedule. So that's really where the project management enhancements that we're talking about are going to help us out. That's going to help us understand what those issues are, what we need to do, what the contractor needs to do to mitigate them, and what maybe we need to do to be addressing them as well.
All right, thank you very much. Let my council colleagues have a few questions here.
There are a few. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. I think that my colleagues from Ward 3 have pretty much asked about every potential question I can think of, but the one that I didn't hear an answer to yet was one that was raised by most of the delegations. That's with respect to the Trafalgar Lakeshore intersection. What is the plan to address that and in particular hopefully mitigate some of the impacts that are clearly going to happen as a result of the dismantlement of that particular intersection?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we need to be working on the 3 blocks of that downtown, of Phase 2 on Lakeshore. When we're not actively working on an area, we need storage, we need staging areas, and we don't have other areas nearby that can work for that. However, we did do things in advance, such as converting the road network to two-way traffic so that it will be easier to move around downtown. And having that clear detour signage so people know where they can go, what's open, what's not, how they can get there, how they can get to those businesses because they are still open during construction is going to be key.
From the report, I understand that it was, the concept of doing it in stages was dismissed because of the complexity around logistics, and I understand that. But is there any way would there be any way to put a focus on getting that piece done, at least the intersection piece done, so it provides north-south access to downtown? Because I can understand that based on the experience at Navy and Lakeshore, this is only going to be worse, I would imagine, in terms of having obstruction to that access.
Through you, Mayor Burton, we have spent considerable time reviewing those issues, and we do want to get that open as soon as we can. However, it will be very difficult to have that open while the other blocks are actively under construction. What we can do is be looking for opportunities for temporary pedestrian access to at least improve the north-south access that way, and making sure that folks know how they can get to those 3 blocks of downtown, of Lakeshore, through clear signage, through clear communication, and making sure people know that those businesses are open.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I guess one of my questions is in regards to shortening the time frame. And have we ever looked at 24-hour construction, like regardless of 7 days a week or going behind or beyond 9? The reason I'm asking that is Councillor Chisholm and I, on certain situations, now they were a regional project, but we worked with staff to say we were willing to take the flack for having it run 24 hours versus, and it was kind of like taking a Band-Aid off. You either do it slowly or you rip it and it's done. And so my question is maybe not the entire project 24-hour, but are there occasions whereby we could work, because of the scope of the work they're doing, shorten it by saying, for that particular portion, you are permitted, with our bylaw and various other staff's permission, to run it 24 hours, so that you're not getting into this, bringing somebody back into the area and then having to wait or deal with weather or whatever.
Yeah. Through Mayor Burton, it is possible for some aspects. We have to look at the noise. We have to look at the impacts to the residents that are there, at night as well. So we're trying to balance both the needs of the businesses and the needs of the residents. But we did have some work that happened overnight in phase 1 related to the sanitary sewer and testing and lining of that, because that was the time when that infrastructure was least needed by both businesses and residents. So we could do that then. We are for phase 2 looking at the streetlight pole, for phase 1 and phase 2, looking at the streetlight poles and whether we can install those overnight as well, because that's not noisy work. It's work that will need a staging area to do, and those staging areas would be more available at nighttime after the businesses have closed. So yes, we are looking for opportunities to do that, but not all of the work could happen overnight.
Okay, all right, I fully appreciate that. So this has been awarded, obviously, because when we reference any change in the contract would be problematic in terms of a financial impact for us and for the town. I guess you had mentioned that you've reinforced or spoken to the contractor to say we're anxious to have this done as quickly as possible to get in and get out. What scenario did they come back with other than saying we can't do it? And the reason I'm asking that is another big project that we had in our ward and going over into Ward 3, the actual contractor is the one who came back to us in the region and said, I've reworked everything, I can make this happen. All you have to do is give me the permission to work within this time frame. So I'm wondering how much of a flexibility there is there, given that you have the start and end date?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we've got a very good relationship with our contractor, and we've had lots of very open discussions about how this can work. The work in phase 1 isn't complete yet. We know that, we've talked about that already. The schedule for phase 2 is based on completing the work for phase 2, so that we're not in a situation where we have to come back the following spring to be tidying up loose ends. So I think that that's something that that needs to be recognized. This was a very ambitious schedule from the start. We've learned a lot in phase 1 about how much time it actually takes to do this work. And so by starting earlier, we're on a better track to finish in 2020 and avoid needing to come back in 2021.
Okay, in reference to your coming back and finishing, but does that impact closure of the road? Like, in other words, those details that still have to be addressed, those don't impact putting up more fencing, reinstalling. What I'm saying is the work is minor in nature, still outstanding, but not so much of an impact in terms of preventing pedestrian access or vehicle access for downtown.
Through you, Mayor Burton, we won't have to close the road in phase 2 to do that work, but we will have to remove all of that temporary asphalt and replace it with the granite that was supposed to be there in the first place. If we had continued working with the road closed, that work would have all been done, and we wouldn't have to be taking that step of putting temporary infrastructure in and then removing it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple quick questions with respect to the presentations, and I want to thank all the deputations who came tonight. It gives me a little bit more clarity on what some of the challenges being with respect to the first phase. The one comment was made on the communication side was confusion. That scares me. Confusion because there's too many people involved with answering questions about the downtown. Right now, as it stands, do we have one town staff person as a point person on site on this project at all times?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we have the downtown project office where our liaison staff are, and if they're not there, they're available by phone and email to be answering questions, and questions should be coming in through them so that they can be coordinated with the right, whether it's the right technical staff or other staff, to be putting back out a consistent answer.
I understand the theory.
Yeah.
What the actual happened, what I've heard tonight, didn't happen that way. My question is this, is that we have a contractor who controls the work, and we don't really have any authority to say, you know what, why don't you start moving in this direction, because we've got any quick turnarounds that can improve the operation. Do we have some authority or pressure onto the contractor to move on some of these projects that could be done instead of waiting? Is there other things you can take them off? I know they're subcontractors. What my suggestion is that maybe we're being laid back a little bit, and we should be putting a little bit of pressure on the contractor with respect to getting this done. So I guess the question is, as long as we're on top of it, we got an oversighter taking care of the project management side of it. I think that's a challenge, and I think you're having discussions, so let's get the discussions into action. That, to me, is really important. What I've heard from Charlene are these quick turnarounds. I'm saying, why aren't these done? I mean, these are quick things that are reasonable, and I don't think have a lot of impact, but they didn't seem to get done. So what I'm saying, what you're telling me now is that with the new communication, this is going to improve that part of the equation?
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Burton, we are putting improvements in place and enhancements to our communications program.
Okay.
And we do have oversight staff there in the project office, all the technical staff there through our consultant all the time.
Okay. Now, the risk factor with respect to getting off schedule, where do you see as the expertise, where the slowdown would happen or delay? Would it be the underground work being done, or is it the weather? Is it all a combination of those? Have we included that in part of the schedule?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, we have accounted for those things that could potentially happen in phase 2 and tried to build those into a realistic schedule that also allows us to, it being based on 5 days, if we have a rain day, we can move that 5th day into the weekend, as an example.
Okay, and one last question. The trees, with respect to the trees that are being put in, we've had a lot of criticism on the size of these trees, and one of the questions has been, well, we put in 4 or 5 trees on the bridge that are more mature, but the ones in the downtown seem to be very small and not attractive. Can you?
Yeah, through Mayor Burton, I'm going to have Ian Wagner from our Parks and Open Space group respond to that.
Good evening. Through you, Mayor Burton. I have reviewed those planting pits that you're referring to that are adjacent to the library. Those planting pits are both wider, but the available planting width is wider by 35 centimeters or a foot. As well, they are longer. They're continuous planting pits, which allows for more available soil to accommodate a larger planting. By comparison, the planting pits that are in the downtown core are smaller by a foot. We took this into consideration. Trees, when they're transplanted, the root ball requires as much soil as is possible around the root ball to accommodate a good growing environment for those new roots to grow, as well as to prevent desiccation of those new roots by the soil, the limited soil in those planting pits drying out too quickly. So the decision was based on that as well. There are studies that have shown that smaller caliper trees have a reduced, transplanting smaller caliper trees has a reduced mortality rate by comparison to larger caliper trees. And there are also studies that show that a smaller caliper tree and a larger caliper tree planted at the same time will become the same size. And that's because the larger caliper tree requires more time as well as puts in more energy to replace those roots which have been lost. So taking all of those considerations, we decided that planting the 50 mil caliper trees in the downtown core was the best option moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. Many of the questions I had have been asked by my council colleagues, but I'm just going to touch a little bit on the communication. I had a chance to review the website, and it says that the project office is only open from 8:30 to noon and by appointment. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, that's correct. That's we do have a full-time liaison, Mary Valley, who is available. She's spending a lot of time out meeting with the companies in the commercial district. We have a part-time staff member who is housed in the project office from 8:30 till noon every day. And as Ms. Stevens has indicated, they are both available by email and by telephone at all times.
Okay. Well, their phone number isn't listed here, so I can certainly understand frustration from the residents and the business owners, because I think for a project of this size, even just 8:30 to noon by appointment isn't very accessible. What I wanted to just recommend and suggest is having a live update on our website, just to keep, maybe if we could upload the project schedule and have a live update of where we are with the project, and also a section for questions that have been asked by fellow business owners, because I'm assuming everybody has the same questions, and then it's just becomes a rumor mill. So just something as simple as putting a frequently asked questions section so that everybody has the same information. I'm not sure if that would be helpful, and kind of also to keep the contractor accountable for, you know, the timeline of when a certain phase will be completed. So that might be something to consider if it would be helpful to the business owners in the area.
Thank you for that suggestion. And I do believe most of the information or requests that have come through are generally coming through by email. And we do believe that having that proactive messaging going out by email directly to the businesses will provide the most timely response. So they're not having to go onto a website and search for information. We're actually sending out to them the most up-to-date information that's available.
Yeah, I was suggesting this in addition to your email updates, because, yeah, this would definitely helpful as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer, for those suggestions. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. So it looks like we've really covered the construction part of it. So why don't we talk just for a second about driving people into shopping downtown? I'm a big fan of the advertising campaign. I love the banner on Trafalgar as you're driving downtown. I like seeing it on the hoarding in downtown. I like seeing the little quips and everything on the signs in downtown. But for the rest of the community, why do we not, without knowing the marketing plan, it just seems like we're preaching to the converted. People have already gone downtown. Are we doing anything electronically? Are we doing anything, you know, bus route schedule, or a bus advertising of some sort? Anything we can do for the rest of the community to realize that downtown is open and available for shopping?
Through you, Mayor Burton, this marketing campaign is really a partnership with the BIA. So they've been undertaking a lot of efforts throughout the community and beyond Oakville to encourage people to come downtown Oakville. With respect to the signage that you mentioned, those signs have been available on every single bus throughout Oakville.
On the exterior or interior?
There are interior, inside.
Okay, that might explain. And I'm a regular transit user, and I don't recall seeing one, but that might explain why you don't see them on the outside as well. If there's some way we could at least look at, if it's a partnership with the BIA, certainly looking at a way of extending the reach somehow, using some of the great creative that you have and pushing it further, even just with electronic advertising, anything like that, just to get more people in the rest of Oakville to realize that downtown is open for business.
Thank you for that suggestion. And I will note as well, Visit Oakville is our tourism organization, and they've been doing a lot of work as well to make sure that downtown Oakville is front and center.
All right, thank you, Councillor Grant. I think we're now going to start our second round with Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Your Worship. For Ms. Stevens, I just had a couple questions about the contract and the contractor. So on page 69, you talk about, it indicates the contractor's responsibility to determine the labor requirements to meet the obligation. You have a Monday to Friday schedule. If they lose a day, can they gain a day on the weekend? So does that mean, so Saturday and Sunday, are they allowed to work?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes.
So then what is the notice that they have to give to us that they do not have labor? So weather's one thing, but if they don't have labor, what's their notice period?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that would be worked out as we're looking at the schedule. That's identifying which crews are available to be able to do things. So it shouldn't be a sort of a day of thing unless it's weather, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
So you have advance notice that they have no issues when we start work in January. They have no issues with labor as being a reason why they can't get the work done.
Through you, Mayor Burton, at this time, I'm not aware that that's an issue for them, that they've looked at this based on the crews that they have and how they would allocate them.
Okay, so the next question I have is related to how do you prioritize within the contractor, because they have other jobs. How do you ensure that they prioritize this job over their other jobs to make sure that in the event there is the labor shortage that you've talked about, that they actually allocate the labor to this project versus other projects.
Through Mayor Burton, what I can say is that they are very well aware of the requirements of completing this project and what's outlined in the contract. They're very aware of the importance of this project to the downtown businesses, to their downtown residents, and to the town as a whole, administratively and our residents. And so we've seen that they've put extra resources on this at the end. They've allocated their resources to get things done because they understood the importance of having that road open in time for the Santa Claus parade. So I trust that with that continued collaboration and ongoing communication with them, they will understand the importance of this job to us and for them to complete. I'm certain that others will be saying that their jobs are just as important as ours, but we've done a lot to ensure that they're aware of just what is expected in terms of getting this project done and what it means to Oakville, and we'll continue to do that as we work through phase 2.
So my last question is just, is there anything council can do to help put pressure on the contractor to recognize the importance of this project to the town of Oakville?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the importance that you've put on it is by asking for this report and spending this evening talking about it. The contractor is well aware of the request for this report and the importance that the Oakville Council places on getting this job done in time. So in a lot of respects, you have been a great part in contributing to that already.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dudek.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, and if this has already been addressed, I apologize. Having Mr. Wagner come forth and address the trees, the one issue that Ms. Plowman referred to was planting at the bottom. Has there been any change in regards to that, like additional plantings? And if not, why?
Through Mayor Burton, we're continuing to review what opportunities there are for any plantings to be added in those tree pits, recognizing the need to protect the health of the tree, but also what opportunities are there to fill that area in. So we're working together on different species and opportunities for that. Is there more to that? Yeah,
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for all those questions. Councillor Haslett-Deal, that look says your hand is in the air.
No, I'm going to look to my partner.
All right, well, I'll look for a hand. Councillor Giddings was first.
That was my hand, Mr. Mayor. The conversation seems to have been exhausted. I'd be happy to move the staff recommendation with one revision to point number 3. It currently says that the closure of Lakeshore Road from Dunn Street to Allen from Jan 15th, 2020 to November 13th, 2020 be approved, period. I'd like that to become a comma. As Councillor Chisholm mentioned in his comments, and my desire to see that the contractor doesn't believe that the Santa Claus Parade 2020 is the target date for this coming phase 2. I'd like the following phrase to be, and that staff report back to council no later than the February 2020 meeting of council on what additional support, revisions, or changes can be implemented to achieve a September completion date. At that point, the contractor will be in the ground and we may have a better sense, and it just keeps the heat on.
Frozen rail.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Madam Clerk, he has written it out, and it's on its way to you. Look, it's arrived. Councillor Hazard-Thiel, I saw your hand.
So I'd be pleased to second that motion, and I've heard across the table a lot of my council colleagues feeling the pain of those that want us to step up and do what we can. So I would encourage you and look to you for support on this motion.
Councillor Dudek, before I call you, I'm planning to ask you to have a recorded vote on this. Did I read your mind? Two minds racing to the same conclusion. All right, to be recognized in support of the motion, please rise to be named. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Dudek, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Longo, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, and Councillor Palmer, and Mayor Burton. I declare the motion carried unanimously. All right, Council, we've been at it about 2 hours, and our next item is the quarterly presentation from Oakville Enterprises Corporation, which means also Oakville Hydro, for those who aren't familiar with that. And so I'm going to call a 2-minute recess to allow the people who might not like to stay for that to leave without disrupting that. So we are recessed, but only shortly. All right, everybody, we will call the meeting back to order, having had a short recess to allow for the coming and going of people as suits their interests. And the next item on our evening is the quarterly report from Oakville Enterprises Corporation and Oakville Hydro. And CEO Rob Lister, I see, is here. Welcome. Council looks forward to your presentation, especially if you're making money.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, councillors. Thanks for having us here this evening. This evening, I'm going to have Sean McCoggan, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Energy and Infrastructure Services, excuse me, speak to our presentation. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce members of my team. So we have Scott Moody, who's our Chief Operating Officer of Oakville Hydro. We have Zareen Fernandez, who's our Senior Vice President of People Excellence. Karen Marner, our Chief Financial Officer. Mary Caputi, Chief of Staff and Senior VP of Construction Operations. Doug Walton, Vice President of Business Development. And Jeff Mocha, Vice President of Enterprise Innovation. This evening, I also have 2 representatives from our Board of Directors. We have Chair David Brennan and new Director Jane Allen. And I will now ask Sean to come forward and speak to our presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and town councillors. We are very pleased to be here before you tonight to provide you an update on Oakville Enterprises Corporation and Oakville Hydro. Just use the keyboard? Okay, thank you. Tonight, our presentation will cover several areas that we're pleased to provide you an update on. Those areas will cover important projects underway, energy reliability and policies, as well as several new developments at OEC and Oakville Hydro. To begin, we'd like to talk about the new Oakville Trafalgar Community Center and the work that Oakville Hydro and OEC are participating in to help that community center become a lead energy efficient project. Our project team is happy to update you that the Geo Exchange project has been installed. And moving into 2020, we are eager to undertake the solar rooftop project that will be providing renewable electricity to that center once that community center is commissioned. These 2 projects together will help that community center reach its LEED certification. Sorry, I missed that. My apologies. Moving on to the next slide. Another way Oakville Hydro is helping the town reduce its footprint is through the Oakville Community Energy Plan. Oakville Hydro's COO, Scott Moody, pictured here, is pleased to be a part of the Oakville Energy Task Force that is driving forward Oakville's Community Energy Plan focused on reducing energy costs, greenhouse gas emissions, while also strengthening the local economy and building an affordable and reliable energy future. On to electricity reliability. At Oakville Hydro, you have heard from us on several occasions highlighting electricity reliability. The importance of reliability is evident in the steps and processes the team takes to remain one of the best in the province, if not in the country. Recently, Oakville Hydro's team and grid worked through the December 1st ice storm, and Oakville Hydro completed this period with no outages to customers. Contributing to this are the effective line clearing assessments and projects, as well as the remote automation capabilities that allows for restoring power very quickly. And as of this year, to date, we have avoided approximately 18,000 hours of customer outages. I also want to provide an update this evening with respect to energy policy. You may recall in 2018, the government announced the cancellation of a group of renewable energy contracts. In 2019, the government has made some changes to the electricity bill, as well recently indicated they are reviewing the 2013 report that recommended consolidation of Ontario's electricity distribution sector. And as of today, it's interesting that only 1% of Ontario residents see energy costs as a key issue. As I just mentioned, a recent item to note for customers was the November 1st change to the electricity bill and the new rebate. The government replaced the fair hydro rebate with the Ontario electricity rebate. If I can just spend a minute unpacking this a little bit for you, I'll describe the changes. The previous electricity rates included a fair hydro plan rebate, which directly reduced the electricity time of use rates before customers were billed. To increase transparency, the provincial government has rescinded the fair hydro plan rebate and introduced the new 31.8% Ontario electricity rebate. This shows the cost of providing electricity to customers on their bill and the amount of the Ontario government rebate on a separate line at the bottom of the bill. So to summarize, the new Ontario electricity rebate reduces electricity costs just as before, but it appears separately on the bill, with the net effect being a 1.8% increase on their monthly bill. And just as an update on time of use rates that we're into for the winter season today, on-peak rates would be approximately 21 cents per kilowatt hour. We'd also like to provide an update this evening on several new developments at OEC in the areas of services, safety, our people, and community. I'm proud to announce this evening a recent service expansion by OEC into meter reading that will encompass reading utility meters for clients across Ontario. GTEL, one of OEC's businesses, is offering this service. This is a continuing example of OEC's focus on growing and diversifying its utility services. Another service example that occurred earlier this year was completing what is called a depth of cover service, where one of our companies provides the services for gas utilities that assesses the coverage of ground above buried underground pipelines. Moving to safety, our safety culture at OEC and Oakville Hydro remains top priority, top of mind every day with all of our employees. We're very proud of this effort and our records. We recently received recognition for this as Oakville Hydro and GTEL Engineering were both acknowledged by the Infrastructure Health and Safety Association for each business achieving 1.5 million man-hours with no lost time incidents. Moving to people, we're very fortunate to have great employees being recognized for their accomplishments and capabilities at our organization. Recent highlights to note are Ron Laidman, our VP of Infrastructure Services, recently received an award for Top 40 Under 40 in the Greater Hamilton region for demonstrating an extraordinary level of success in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors and a role model for their fellow business professionals and to the community. Pictured in the middle is Enzo Agameri. Enzo was accepting the Harris Award for the outstanding customer service on behalf of Oakville Hydro. And lastly, Mary Caputi, our Chief of Staff and SVP Construction, for being awarded the Outstanding Employee by the Ontario Energy Association for notable contributions and was consistently dependable and portrayed a positive attitude while serving as a role model for others. As well, OEC continues to be very active in the communities we operate in and serve. Over the past few months, this has included a number of activities. Notable ones include Take Our Kids to Work Day, the recent Santa Claus Parade, where staff enjoyed participating with our Oakville Hydro float. And lastly, Oakville Hydro sponsored the Bronte Village Stakeholders Coat Drive, providing space to store coat racks, sort and help transport coats to the distribution center, and in total, nearly 800 coats were distributed to people in need. As I draw my comments to a close, the people of Oakville Hydro and OEC would like to thank the Mayor and Town Council for their support, and we wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Are there questions? Councillor Giddings.
And thank you for the report. Question for you regarding the recent cancellation of the rebates on the EV, electric vehicles, and the 50%-ish drop in sales. Have you been experiencing any drop or expecting a drop in terms of home charging stations?
We did see that recent press on the effect of the rebate. To my knowledge, we have not seen an impact from any change in EV sales on Oakville Hydro's load.
All right, and we had a fair number of comments when the social media came out with the changes to the electricity billing. And thanks for the information that was provided for our newsletter, from the Fair Hydro Plan rebate to the Ontario electricity rebate. Did you get many calls coming in on that? There was a belief out there that there was going to be the 30% increase in hydro rates.
I believe our customer service department did take some calls on the issue, and we handled it. Yeah, but not a great deal, as Scott is indicating.
Interesting. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, Councillor Hazlet-Deal.
I would just have a special request that when you're putting those solar panels up, take some really great photos, because we'd like to share that with the world.
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely. We'd love to do that.
We'll arrange for you to be up there. Thank you very much, Sean.
Okay, thank you.
We now turn to the standing committee reports, and we lead off with a presentation from the Budget Committee by Councillor Tom Adams, the chair. Councillor Adams, we look forward to your presentation.
I'm assuming I might be able to work from here.
I believe help is on its way.
Help needs to be on its way, because... While we're doing this, I'll lead off to say that on behalf of the Budget Committee, I have a few thoughts to share with you, but most importantly is recognizing the hour. I hope to be able to go through quickly and move us through as fast as we can, recognizing that I think there may be some other stuff on the agenda that we want to deal with as well.
Councillor, there's nothing more than important than the budget. Please don't feel pressure.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. There is nothing more important than our budget, because none of the rest of the stuff we do could happen without this budget.
That's right.
And
don't go cutting corners.
I won't cut too many corners, but I will try and move us through as quickly as possible. First of all, I want to thank everybody for all of their efforts in putting this budget together. I was looking at the number of meetings, the number of hours that went into the actual Budget Committee meetings, and when you add up all the people around the table, all the staff that went into the meetings themselves, it's hundreds of hours. And then you add on top of that the piles of hours that go into actually producing the budget book and the materials that are behind that. And so what I want to say is that this budget is going to keep Oakville on track in terms of being at the top of the list of being one of the most fiscally healthy community in Ontario and throughout Canada. This means, as an Oakville resident, that not only can you continue to feel confident in the high level of services and programs that we have here in Oakville, but also in our fiscal health. As a council, we've kept our town finances very strong, very predictable, and our property tax increases have been in line with inflation for many years. Our strong financial position and the financial stewardship that council has been working through over the years is going to continue to give our residents the opportunity to choose the kind of community it wants to be throughout the future and for the next generation. And among other things, our finances have allowed us to get a new hospital. They've allowed us to double our community facilities. They've allowed us to continue with the services and programs and quality of service that our residents expect. And of course, to have an infrastructure throughout the community that is really a fantastic set of infrastructure and maintained on a timely basis. One of these buttons will let me go forward. There we go. You'll remember that we gave staff a guideline to keep the overall tax increases in line with inflation for this budget, and that is in fact what we're bringing forward to you as a recommendation. The overall recommendation is an overall tax increase of 2%. The recommended town of Oakville piece of that is a 3.08%, which when you combine it with the Halton region and the education portions of the property tax increases, creates that overall property tax increase of 2%, which is in fact in line with the recent Toronto Consumer Price Index values, which have fluctuated between 1.7 and 2.6% throughout 2019. When we average the monthly CPI values for Toronto, it's actually 2.04%. So we're almost dead on those figures. Looking forward in the forecast, the Bank of Canada is forecasting for 2020 and 2021 figures that are very, very close to 2%. These are some of the figures when you look around our neighboring municipalities. The 2020 recommended budget proposes the lowest increase amongst our neighbors. In fact, this is, I believe, the 6th straight year that the Budget Committee has recommended to you the lowest increase among our neighbors. These figures are all from either approved or proposed budgets for 2020. They're presented on a comparable basis. And I'll note that the higher figures for our neighboring municipalities really show the pressures that they're facing with respect to dealing with the unfunded infrastructure, renewal costs, and construction costs that they have. Our neighbors are likely to continue to outpace inflation in future years. And by contrast, Oakville has a fully funded asset management plan, which allows us to avoid some of those same pressures. And so we're not in the same situation that they are. Also want to highlight that a number of the municipalities haven't yet announced their 2020 expectations for their budgets, and so many municipalities will only be approving budgets several months into 2020. So I want to commend all of our staff and all of our committee members and all of you as council for being able to be in a position tonight to consider approving a budget. It's a good governance practice, and it's one that others outside of the organization have suggested perhaps that the province should step in and require it of municipalities. I also want to highlight the introduction of other types of fees that are occurring in other municipalities around the GTA. Mississauga, there I've noted the stormwater charge that they have. Toronto also has a municipal land transfer tax that they've had for a number of years. I understand that if you had to replace that, it would be in the order of a 14% property tax increase, so they rely very heavily on that. They also have a garbage fee. So they have a waste management fee, which we don't have here in Halton. This is just to remind everybody that our property taxes are made up of a town, a regional, and an education component. Each municipality is unique in the breakdown. Some are single tier, and others like us are a two-tier municipality. As a result, comparing tax increases from one municipality to another can be a little bit tricky, particularly when only one piece is mentioned in the news. And so that's why reviewing and managing the overall increase, including all three of these components, is very helpful in creating consistency in your comparisons. As a lower tier municipality, the town is one portion of the overall bill. That's the 41% that you see there, and the remaining 59% is levied on behalf of the region or the province for education purposes. The budget presented today focuses only on that 41%. The regional piece was already approved, and 8 out of 15 of us also serve at the regional council, and so we work there to make sure that we're aligning our budgets for the benefit of our residents. This is the overall chart. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I know you've all looked at it in your budget books, but regarding the town-only portion of the total tax increase, that's the 3.08% figure. Nearly a third of it relates to building and renewing our infrastructure through the 1% capital levy. That's a very important feature of our budget and goes back to 1996 when the capital levy was first introduced in Oakville, and it's now considered a gold star in terms of how you deal with infrastructure planning. You can see that the overall impact will be a 2% increase, which is, as I said, the lowest increase among our local neighbors, and it's quite certainly one of the lowest in the GTA. The 2020 budget includes a total operating expenditure of $345 million. The majority of these costs relate to programs and services that are active in the daily lives of our residents and our families. They include all of our core services, like the road maintenance and storm sewers, the parks and rec, the fire department, libraries, transit, many, many more. And I wanted to make sure that citizens know that not every dollar that we spend, not every one of our expenses is funded by property taxes. Only 60% of it comes from property taxes, and by comparison, in 2003, when myself and a few others around this table, Councillor Grant and Councillor Dudek, you joined me at the same time. At that time, 66% of our revenue came from property taxation. So this drive for protection of the taxpayers on this basis has been ongoing for well over a decade. And this is the figure that shows the $207 million of actual tax dollars that are going to be raised in 2020, and the largest share of that will actually be going to renewing our capital infrastructure, followed closely by the Oakville Fire Department and their services. We're very proud to be preserving the important services for our local families and building and maintaining our infrastructure, unlike, as I said, a number of other jurisdictions where there is inadequate funding to repair the aging roads, sewers, facilities that they have. Regarding some of the big highlights of this year's budget are the recognition of the work that staff began previously to identify savings and efficiencies while protecting resident services. The Budget Committee is recognizing the savings found over the last year by reversing the stabilization funding that was used last year in the budget and instead including those savings directly in the operating budget of the town. There's a number of important projects that are recognized in the budget. They include the opening of the new fire station number 8 in Palermo, and of course the related staffing that the station will need. And then of course the much anticipated new Oakville Trafalgar Community Center. Both of those projects, not only do they require substantial capital costs, but they have substantial operating impacts as well, both this year and in 2021. So we'll see it twice. We're keeping our municipal house in order. We have very high quality infrastructure as a result of the ongoing discipline of applying that 1% capital levy. We also had additional funds that this council had previously brought forward through the special paving levy. In fact, we recently recognized the quality of our local roads by redirecting some of that funding towards various stormwater management projects. We have a plan for managing our infrastructure that's fully funded. Many municipalities, as I've said before, are issuing very significant levels of debt in order to maintain existing infrastructure, not build new stuff. And this debt's limiting their future ability to make choices about what their community is going to look like in the future. Residents tell me when I meet with them that they're very impressed with Council's commitment to good financial management. Oakville's financial health is very strong and sustained. Council has received some information regarding the reserves, which continue to be strong and well positioned. In fact, our stabilization reserves are remaining stronger than those of our neighbors. Our recommendations advocate for appropriate debt management as well. Only about 6% of our debt is supported by property taxes. The rest is supported through other means. The Oakville Hospital debt, which by the way will be down to about $80 million from the original $90 million, is being paid for by non-tax revenue at Oakville Enterprise Corporation, so it was nice to see them this evening showing what they do. The development charges and harbors and the Oakville Soccer Club are supporting some of the other elements of our debt. The LED street light conversion project is also supporting debt for that project directly from the savings of the project. And our plan places a tax levy supported debt at about $6.2 million at the end of the year. And for the record, that number was 4 times higher at $24 million back in 2006. And just for the record, those are the projected figures for reducing the outstanding debt by the end of 2020. Here's the capital program that we've got. The chart shows the capital spending by program area in 2020. The largest program is infrastructure planning, which includes funding for roads, bridges, storm sewers, active transportation. And I want to note here that while the town does receive funding through development charges to offset the costs of infrastructure for new development, the existing property taxpayers continue to be forced to subsidize development as a result of the province's rules and the Development Charges Act. And that's a matter that we discuss not only here, but at the region of Halton as well. Our 2020 infrastructure work does include significant funding of $11.2 million for stormwater and erosion control. The Oakville Road Resurfacing Program continues to be a substantial $8.1 million. It also includes work on Spears Road from 4th Line to Dorval, as well as reconstruction of part of North Service Road east of Trafalgar Road. Both of these projects will also improve the active transportation in those corridors. Our transit system will also be benefiting from the introduction of some electric buses and charging infrastructure. Southeast Oakville will again be our biggest recreation and culture project in the name of the Oakville Trafalgar Community Center, which is our single largest rec program project for the year at $7.1 million. This will be the final piece, the final installment of the $48 million project. So it's a big deal. We're going to have a big party when we get to the fall, right? And $10.8 million, we just finished talking about Lakeshore Road reconstruction. Well, $10.8 million is going to the Downtown Lakeshore Reconstruction Project this year, and that ranks 3rd in our list of top 10 of the largest capital projects for the year. And together, those two projects make up 15% of our capital budget, but I don't want you to feel that that's the only place money is being spent. The capital budget also includes important work all across town, including the emergency services. I've spoke already about the funding for the new fire station at Pine Glen and Bronte. There's also in Bronte itself the funding for the Bronte Athletic field work and the St. Anne's Park that's down in that area as well. There's funding for new and renewed facilities across Oakville at our rec centers. It includes nearly $700,000 in capital replacement work at 16 Mile Sports in Ward 7, $600,000 at River Oaks for replacement and renovation work. So there's significant work happening all around town. Looking forward, the combined numbers for the region and the provincial shares and the town of Oakville shares, the forecast for 2021 and 2022 will be 2%. We have pressures in each of these years as we not only are going to be opening up new facilities and infrastructure, but we're facing provincial downloading risks. We're seeing risks of even further reductions in funding from the province, including provincial cuts to our ability to fund infrastructure for the growth that we're all facing. These cuts and downloads are and will in the future reduce our ability to provide the various requested services from our residents or for our residents. Council had directed staff to prepare the 2020 budget to be in line with inflation, and we're positioned to do the same in the future. The Budget Committee is recommending that we give direction to staff to prepare the 2021 to 2023 budgets, keeping the overall tax increases in line with inflation as well. One of my favorite charts right here. I recently reviewed the increases over Oakville's last 22 years, and I'll note that not only were the tax increases for the last 12 years nearly a full % lower than the average increases of the previous 10 years, but the variability of those increases has also been a lot more. In fact, the variability of our tax increases over the last 12 years has been less than half of the previous period of time. Basically, our increases have been lower, they've been more predictable, and they've been on a downward trend. All good news. So in summary, I'd like to thank all the members of our staff who spent a lot of time preparing the 2020 budget. They've answered tons of questions. In particular, I'd like to thank Catherine Hewitson and Nancy Sully for their work, but they have an amazing team of financial managers in the background who are the professionals who have been working on the various program areas to make sure that we have the information that we need to make an informed decision. And they're also the ones that scamper around to answer all of our questions that we come up with during the process itself. I'd also like to thank the members of the public who've taken a lot of time to provide their input and thoughts to us over, not only during the budget process itself, but throughout the year. It really does help guide the decision-making of council. And this includes not only those who came to the committee, but we also had a number of outreach events, a number of consultations that we did in the months leading up to the budget, and all of those discussions were very helpful. Finally, I want to thank all of you, my council colleagues. You all took a lot of time going through the budget materials. You've all asked a lot of good questions. You've all represented your constituents very well throughout that process, and so I appreciate all of that, and I thank you for letting me lead the process again this year. I'd like to recognize Mayor Burton and Councillors Robertson, Chisholm, and Haslett-Thiel for your efforts on the 2020 budget. It was good working with you on it. I think we did some good work. So, Your Worship, it'd be my pleasure to move the recommendations of the Budget Committee at the appropriate time. There's one minor amendment that's regarding the November 21st minutes on page 40 of the agenda tonight. Item 6 under the automated speed enforcement, Part 2 should have read that staff be directed to provide a report to council, not that it be a report to the Community Services Committee. The Budget Committee actually did make the recommendation that it be a report to council, but the minutes didn't quite reflect it correctly. So, thank you very much for all of your time this evening, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Got one for you already from Councillor Elgar, and more to come.
Councillor, thanks for the budget presentation. Again, 2% sounds really good. But one thing I wonder if we should be putting in the presentation so that people are aware of the cost of growth, to highlight how much we are spending on the total town tax levy that is actually due to cost of growth, due to the fact of the 1997 Development Charges Act that was put in place and has never been changed since that time. Like, can you,
I worry like you about those numbers, and the numbers are I fear, are going to get worse rather than better, given the changes that are coming forward. The latest numbers that we have, I think, are from the 2017 DC study work. We pulled those numbers out. They're available. And we, I think, need to do a better job of telling the story.
See, I think
because if we're going to get the provinces,
I think it's going to get worse. But right now, the residents and the tax levy are subsidizing $16.2 million in 2020. And I think, as Nancy says, I think that isn't that 7.8% of the budget? Is that correct, Ms. Sully? I just want to make sure I got the right numbers.
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, that's the correct number.
So it is 16.2.
16.2,
and it's 7.8% of our budget.
On the levy.
On the levy.
Yeah.
And similarly at the region, it's like 14.1 million, and we're around 42% of that number. So another 5.9 million. So we're running over $22 million just on that one thing. It's one of the biggest item budgets that we've got. So, and it's because of subsidization of the development industry for growth. I thank you for that. I think it should be highlighted.
Thank you for highlighting it, Councillor. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
At the appropriate time, I wanted to add change a clause to clause 9, and Town Clerk Vicky was trying to help me with this, so hopefully I'm going to get this correct. The clause that I'd like to add is that the staff report back in Q2 on implementing standing reports to be provided to the Budget Committee going forward, including department overtime, department use of external consultants, the variance to budget, and department spending related to climate change initiatives, and any others they would recommend. So that would be my first addition. And I have a second one as well, if you'd like me to read it. And my second is that the request for a skateboard park be referred to the capital budget for consideration in 2021.
Let's just take that as moving those amendments. Let's take them one at a time. The first one, I'm looking for a second. Councillor Giddings, the second one. Can I have a second? Councillor Giddings. Okay, I'm going to call the first one. All those in favor of the First Amendment, please raise your hands. Any opposed? That's carried. All those in favor of the Second Amendment, please raise your hands. Any opposed? That's carried. So now the entire the entire meal is before us. Councillor Duddick, is that a, oh, okay. So we're almost ready. All right. I want to thank the budget chair. I think his hard work is appreciated by all of us. It's good to know he's ready to help face the threats from the province to our future budgets. There are downloads being absorbed in the regional portion of our 2020 municipal budgets. There appear to be downloads coming to be absorbed in future municipal budgets at both the regional and town levels. Some town and regional capital projects required for population growth are being moved from development charges to a new so-called community benefit charge at both municipal councils. The new community benefit charge formula has not been revealed by the province. We have heard the community benefit charge formula may be released late this Friday with a request that we comment by January 10th and with implementation for January 20th. The same minister who told municipalities the community benefits charge will keep us whole on financing also told developers they should expect to receive savings. It will be interesting to see how he will make both those things come true. There are other provincial threats. The province's fall economic statement, just the other day, contained statements about further cuts to provincial taxes and about studying the way the property tax works for businesses. It will be a challenging experiment in fiscal management if provincial tax cuts cause downloading of provincial services to municipal property taxes, while at the same time changing how the property tax works. The what I will call the municipal adventures of the provincial government are a long way from what they promised to do in their winning campaign in the 2018 election. Then they promised to make the province 4% more efficient with no cuts or losses. They were going to deliver, that means they were going to deliver the province's $150 billion services for 4% less, for $6 billion less. So you'd get 150 worth of services for 144. That was the promise. And what they've done instead is they've delivered both cuts and losses, and they've increased government spending by almost $14 billion and increased the provincial debt. The fall economic statement also promised $6 million a year for Ontario's 39 largest municipalities to fund studies to develop municipal operational efficiencies. You heard earlier tonight that we do that anyway. $6 million divided by the 39 largest municipalities is $150,000 a year for each. And it's less if it's allocated by population because Toronto is so big. On a population basis, we might expect to see $112,597.41 approximately. We are the 12th largest municipality. However little it is, we will use it because even without such funding, Oakville has always worked to create efficiencies to reduce tax increases. We were the first, and we still are the only government anywhere in Canada using performance-based program budgeting, or if you like, outcomes management, to drive value for our taxpayers. And you can see the benefit that that delivers when you think about how we are able to provide the new services and new facilities Oakville residents want while delivering the lowest tax increases among our neighbors. There's value for money being demonstrated every year here by you people. This council set a budget direction to keep a lid on tax increases of no more than inflation. Staff and the budget committee have done their very best to keep to that requirement, and they delivered what we asked for. There were budget requests that could not fit in this year's budget envelope. Let's all agree with this amendment to think of them and others as work opportunities for the next budget. This budget has delivered on our unanimous council strategic work plan, and together, we will continue to make progress in our work to make Oakville Canada's most livable town. I would like to call for a recorded vote on the budget to be registered in support. Please, as amended, please rise to be named. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Duddock, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Longo, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, and Councillor Palmer, and Mayor Burton. I declare the motion passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Longo seconded Mr. Adams's motion. I neglected to mention that. I'll even say that on microphone. It was Mr. Longo in the library with the candelabra. All right. We now turn to the Standing Committee report for Administrative Services from December 9th and the confidential report of the closed session of the Administrative Services for December 9th. And there was a memo distributed item 1 making a small change to that, which you have before you, I believe, right, Madam Clerk? And I'll look for a mover and seconder. Councillor Chisholm?
I would like to separate item 8 from
Okay.
the Administrative Service report.
Okay. Will you move the balance?
Yes.
Can I have a seconder for the balance? Councillor Longo. Can I put the vote on the balance? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The balance, the rest of ASC is adopted. Councillor Chisholm, you have the floor.
Thank you, Worship. This is with respect to the sponsorship application put by the Oakville Soccer Club. And first, I'd like to make the position that the Oakville Soccer Club is a very strong organization and is well respected in Ontario. And for the work they do, it's great. What I'm looking at is I have some challenge and concerns of, I guess you draw the analogy is that keeping church separate from government. And this is something new for the town to be looking at with respect to commercial sponsorship on tax-based facilities. And with maybe the possibility of a lost identity of the town and so forth. My understanding too, with respect to sponsorship on facilities, it's usually large facilities that have professional or semi-professional clubs or organizations within that facility, and I can appreciate the amount of budget they need to run those type of events and sports. What my concern is, and I guess the questions will be of staff, if we go down this lane with respect to the sponsorship, I have a couple of questions. If this opens up as a sponsorship on a town facility, does that open up now to looking at facilities like a Performing Arts Center, 16 Mile Complex, QEPCC Center? Would that be as part of this? If we open this up and approve it, does it open up for the rest of our facilities?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think this is a slightly unique situation because this is a third party requesting it who have a lease agreement. So within the lease agreement, it clearly states that they do have naming rights to the building that they are leasing. The same would apply to the gymnastics club. However, for any sort of facility that is directly operated by the town, I don't think that that would necessarily presume that it sets an immediate precedent. I think it's unique to those two license agreements.
With respect to policies, procedures, and our signed bylaws, I understand all the process we have to go through. Is there within the narrative with respect to it aligns with the town's values? Do we take that seriously in consideration with respect to getting into an agreement on a sponsorship on a town facility?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly when we looked at the application, We reviewed the application within context of all of the relevant bylaws. We also looked at what our advertising policy is in terms of appropriate guidelines. So we looked at all of those issues in a very comprehensive way to ensure that if we were bringing a report forward on Oakville Soccer Club and what their request was, that all of those issues had been carefully considered.
And my last question with respect to that, if we find that the advertising or sponsorship veers off or the reputation has been tarnished with respect to something might happen with the company, so forth, and it tarnishes the town, do we have the ability of cutting ties quickly with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that we would certainly have recourse with respect to any sort of issue like that, in the same way that we do with any advertising that we have. For example, transit has advertising. If, there was a change in reputation of a company, we would certainly take a look at that very seriously.
And my last question with respect to the procurement side of it, of an RFP, will we be criticized by other competitors with respect to going to a single source sponsorship that the Oakville Soccer Club have obtained? Do we open ourselves for any criticism with respect to that, or is that something that would be specific to the Oakville Soccer Club?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a couple of things in terms of consideration. First of all, Oakville Soccer Club is a separate legal entity, so they are responsible for their own procurement. That being said, when they did come forward to committee, they did indicate, and certainly the executive director has stated to me as well, that they originally went out to an RFP that did not garner any interest whatsoever. So they did initiate an open process, and then as a result of the failure of that process, they looked at different ways that they could engage interest with different parties in order to consider some type of sponsorship. So they did initiate a full and open process right from the beginning.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar, you indicated you have questions?
I certainly do. I didn't until Ms. Bell spoke, but you mentioned Glen Abbey Recreation Center, and you said there could be something similar because the gymnastics there. So you're saying that we could be renaming the Glen Abbey Rec Center if somebody comes forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, all I was indicating is that the Oakville Soccer Club is a unique situation because of the conditions contained within the license agreement that is held with the town. What I identified was that the gymnastics club also has that clause in their license agreement. They have not approached us with any type of interest in naming rights. They're certainly interested in partnering with the town in the future, but we've not had any discussion around naming rights whatsoever. If they were to come forward, we would certainly follow the same process that we did with Oakville Soccer Club, and we would bring it forward for consideration to council in terms of the nature of a proposed partnership, the same sort of issues. We would look at the same issues as we did for Oakville Soccer.
So we could lose the name, the Glen Abbey Recreation Center, the community center. That's possible with
Through
this
you,
way the
Mr.
lease
Chair,
is?
they only occupy a portion of Glen Abbey Community Center.
Absolutely.
So I doubt strongly that we would entertain renaming the entire facility for a tenant within the community center.
You're sure? Now, yeah, that's very important. Are you sure about that? Or is their lease, they could do the whole building?
The naming, no, the naming is clear that it's for the area that they lease, because that's, the lease agreement is focused and scoped entirely to the space that they lease.
Thank you.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. On the same vein, you talked about, and I totally understand the leasing component. Does that mean that once that lease ends, that signage will be removed? In other words, there's an opportunity where the town could just put Town of Oakville facility on it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say yes.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. What's a follow-up question I forgot to ask? Our facilities, majority of our facilities, let's use the Performing Arts Center. That is operated and run by our staff. Internally, if we go with the corporate sponsorship, does that open it up for town staff in their budgets to saying, we're looking at corporate sponsorship in order to reduce our budget in some shape and form? Can they do that? Does the staff have the ability to do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do receive sponsorship dollars now for programming, as does the library. However, if we were to ever entertain the idea of a broader naming strategy, we would first of all come to council to get endorsement from a guiding principle standpoint that this is the direction that council wants us to go in. We wouldn't arbitrarily go out and seek a naming opportunity without the formal endorsement of council in the first place.
Thank you.
Councillor, I'd just add for your comfort, the member of council who occupied your seat before you was a big proponent here of going out and getting naming rights for all our buildings. And the council of the day did not agree with that approach. So council remains supreme. In this particular case, the reason I support the soccer club's arrangement with the credit union is it's a local credit union supported by the employees of a very important local business. We gave them, before you came to council, we gave them the right in their lease to so go and do. And they satisfied me at committee that they had done an RFP to check the market, and then they had gone out and found a very appropriate sponsor for a quite subdued treatment of the outside of the building. And our name continues to be, the Oakville name and logo continues to be equal and not overshone by the sponsorship. And on the north side, where there's presently no sign, the sponsorship will go and our logo will be added there so that even there we don't lose precedence. So do you have more questions?
I'd just like to add to your comments, Your Worship. I don't have issue, and I congratulate the Oakville Soccer Club on moving this forward. I just want to make sure that we have policies and processes in place, because perception is somebody sees that sign and they're going to be knocking at the door and say, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. So all I'm saying, it's the challenge we have is making sure that we're comfortable with it and we can stand steadfast with the policy. Thank you.
Yes, and I welcome the opportunity you provided for us to give you those reassurances. May I look for a mover and seconder now? Councillor Longo, seconded by Councillor Duddick. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for the diligence, Councillor Chisholm, in being certain about those things. Council, I'd like to ask for your attention now to the consent item number 1, the records retention bylaw update, which we need to pass. Councillor Knoll moves it. Councillor Grant seconds it. May I put the vote? All in favor? That's carried. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm wondering if 2 of you would be good enough to give us a motion to go past the hour. Councillor Duddick and Councillor Elgar, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. I'm going to call your attention to item C1 and ask if we could have a mover and seconder for the motion in that. Councillor Duddick and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? And that is adopted. I would like to ask the same thing for C2. And assuming that we pass this now this way, I will then make public the content of the motion. May I have a mover? I need a mover for C2. Councillor Adams, I need a seconder. Councillor Chisholm, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. I will now announce that Council has adopted the following resolution. 1, that staff be authorized to advise the local planning appeal tribunal that the town does not object to the tribunal exercising its discretion under Section 35, of the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act to amend the zoning bylaw approved by order dated April 29th, 2019, to accommodate a widening of Trafalgar Road. Number 2, that in the event that the tribunal does not exercise its discretion, the filing of an application by the owner of 297 Queens Avenue for variances to the zoning bylaw necessary to accommodate the widening of Trafalgar Road be authorized pursuant to Section 45, sub 1.4 of the Planning Act. Thank you, everybody. In the same manner, I would call your attention to item C3, which is labeled in public as the Oakville Hydro Promissory Notes. Councillor Grant moves it. Councillor Longo seconds it. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. I'm advised by legal that it's now appropriate to announce that council has just has resolved as follows: that the corporation of the town of Oakville be permitted to accept a promissory note from Oakville Enterprises Corporation in the amount of $9,083,255 and a promissory note from Oakville Hydro Electricity Distribution, Inc. in the amount of $67,458,839 in payment of existing promissory notes in the same amounts, with the form of the promissory notes acceptable to the Commissioner of Corporate Services and the town solicitor. Thank you, everybody. Now, as I announced at the start, we're going to move item C4 to the end. And we've dealt with discussion items 2 and 3. We have a new discussion item not previously listed, which was circulated as an addendum, and that's the Integrated Traffic and Safety Management report that I wrote for you, and I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Chisholm moves, Councillor Dudek seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that is approved. Thank you. Now, we have, I believe, well, there's only one other bit of public business before we need to go into camera. So how about we jump to the notice of motion of support of the Paris-Galt Moraine Conservation Act. This was introduced at a previous council meeting for action tonight. It was moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Giddings. Is there discussion? May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. That's carried. And there are 2 public requests for report. One moved by Councillor Adams and seconded by Councillor Haslett-Thiel, that staff report back on options to improve transit service through the use of real-time ride-hailing, including options to pilot the technology in low ridership areas in a financially efficient way in time to allow financial implications to be considered for the 2021 budget. May I, any discussion? May I put the vote? All in favor? The request for report is approved. Also, another request for report comes from Councillor O'Meara, that town staff report back on a procedure for requesting street speed surveys, and that this procedure include a way to make public the results online and set a routine for how and when the speed surveys are accomplished. And Councillor Robertson is seconding it. I will put the vote. All those in favor? The report is approved. The request is approved. And that brings us to the end of the meeting, except for the closed matters. Council, the motion to extend past the hour was only to 10:30. As a precaution, because you can't do it in camera, may I have another motion to extend the meeting without limit? Councillor Dudek, seconded by Councillor Longo. All in favor? You need to put your hands up. This is a count-sensitive vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? Well, it's close, but it carries. Thank you, everybody. Now, the motion is to go into closed session. We'll read this way. And I need a mover and seconder. That council resolve into a closed meeting session for the purpose of dealing with personal matters about an identifiable individual and the purpose of dealing with labor relations or employee negotiations, and for the purpose of dealing with personal matters about an identifiable individual. And these are permitted under the Act and our procedure bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Dudek and seconded by Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? That does carry. Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, you need to rig the room for a meeting closed to the public for these necessary purposes. All right, council is resuming its public meeting, having met in a session closed to the public for the consideration of personal matters about an identifiable individual, dealing with labor relations or employee negotiations, and dealing with personal matters about an identifiable individual in accordance with the Municipal Act and the Procedure Bylaw. And now, if I have this right, we need a mover and a seconder for the resolution that staff be directed to proceed with option 3 as set out in the report dated December 11th, 2019 from the Human Resources Department. Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Longo, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. We need a motion with respect to C6 Human Resources matter that the verbal update from the Director of Human Resources be received. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Knoll, all in favor? Carried. And I will announce that as regards item C4, direction to staff was given in closed session. And you can have that back, yes. The advisory committee minutes are not, we have none. Just checking if there's anything missing here. I believe we have now reached consideration and reading of the bylaws. Didn't take long at all. Councillor Dudek is moving the bylaws as listed. We need a seconder. Oh, thank you, Councillor O'Meara. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. Thank you very much for your generous time and attention. And we've completed all the work that we were supposed to do, and so we are adjourned.